Tay Hyun was humiliated at school, then awakened Predation, a power that steals other awakened abilities. On the very first day, the classmates who treated him like trash became the first targets of his revenge. Ba Huku attacked him publicly, using awakened strength against a student everyone believed had never awakened. But Tay Hyun carried the combat knowledge of his 35-year-old future inside his 19-year-old body. Predation activated when his body reached its limit, devouring hostile powers and registering them as his own. After defeating one bully, he immediately stole Stone Skin and rose from rank F to rank E. That single victory proved the weak student was gone, because every enemy could now become his next upgrade. And before the school understood what happened, Tay Hyun had already turned humiliation into overwhelming revenge. 1 month earlier, his future self had watched veteran hunters die before an SSS-rank monster called As Modius. That monster tore off his arm, invaded his memories, and prepared to erase the last worthless survivor. At a special test being held for the students, the man in front can spot talent in the middle of the crowd. His observer's eye can see the power of every student's aura. One of the students raises his hand and says, "There's an imposter among them. Someone who hasn't even awakened." He's talking about Tay Hyun. Pissed off, our MC gets up from his seat and challenges everyone in the room. Looking straight at the man, he tells him to read his aura one more time. This time, the man's eyes go wide. This is a power he's never seen in a student. Now, the protagonist is going to prove everyone wrong about him. But first, we need to go back 1 month. On this terrifying battlefield, the veteran hunters feel no fear. But the rookie is fighting just to keep from soiling himself and endures being called trash by those same veterans. The reason in this world to be weak is to be trash. All who awaken must come to the abyss to stop it from spilling into the real world. Here, the most powerful are treated as gods. The protagonist, weak as he is, struggles to prove he has some worth. But in the blink of an eye, everyone is dead. And he never even saw it happen. The strongest, most arrogant of them lie dead. So what can a weakling like him possibly do now? As Modius, an SSS-rank monster, he accepts his fate. The monster attacks, and without a single touch, the monster rips his arm off. The difference in their power is a bottomless abyss. But As Modius isn't here simply to kill him. A beam of energy shoots from the monster's hand, piercing deep into Tay Hyun's mind. These are his memories. His parents die in a car crash. At school, he is treated like a weakling. He grows up a failure, judged by everyone, a miserable life. As Modius shows him his worst memories before delivering the final blow. But then something strange happens. All conditions have been met. With that, a supreme being appears before Tay Hyun. It is too much for a human mind to comprehend. On one side, God, and on the other side, As Modius is present, but frozen in time. An SSS-rank being completely immobile. The being of white energy then says, there is something more important for him to focus on. It has gone by many names, but the one that fits best is King. He is here to grant his authority to Tay Hyun. Tay Hyun's mind cannot possibly grasp the situation. He must simply accept. King says he admired Tay Hyun's while making him the best choice. Tay Hyun has no choice. A colossal thing utterly beyond comprehension. It detonates. An explosion that annihilates all of existence. And so our story begins. Tay Hyun's eyes are forced open by a classmate. His eyes are wide open now. The bully's name is Ba Huku, and he doesn't like it when Tay Hyun keeps his eyes closed. He needs to see clearly and understand who runs this school. Tay Hyun hasn't had time to process it yet. How is he here? And more importantly, what is this thing he's never seen before? It says he's 19 years old. If that's the case, Tay Hyun can't hold it in and starts laughing maniacally. Damn, the guys are scared now. Maybe they actually drove him insane. The bully has never dealt with this kind of reaction before. Tay Hyun strikes back, knocking a few teeth out of his mouth. The punch sends him flying 3 or 4 meters away. This guy, Tay Hyun, shows no fear at all. The bully's friends are next. Tay Hyun then tells them to attack already. The losers come at him, unleashing their powers. To this day, Tay Hyun has yet to awaken, making this an act of pure cowardice. But even so, they are overwhelmed by sheer brute force. They are the real failures here. Just 2 minutes ago, Tay Hyun was 35 years old. Despite his lack of talent, he trained his body to its absolute limit. His effort was unparalleled. He studied every book and analyzed every skill. He even trained in every martial art he could get his hands on. So now in a 19-year-old's body, and armed with all that knowledge, these guys are nothing. Even with their powers, not a single one can lay a finger on him. Tay Hyun remarks that he really needed a good workout. Unfortunately, the first bully is a more experienced awakened who decides to retaliate with full force. A punch like that is lethal, so Tay Hyun dodges. He puts everything he has into avoiding the blow. But this guy is fighting to kill, unleashing all of his power. His attacks are so powerful, they rip through the school ceiling. Tay Hyun still manages to dodge, and he counters with a strike to the face. But skill alone can't always overcome raw power. This guy isn't just stubborn. His face is made of stone too close. Tay Hyun takes a devastating blow. A single hit leaves him in this state. Ba Huku is determined to teach him that inferiors exist only to bow. Only the strong have the right to give orders. The weak belong on the floor where they obey. But Hux has pushed him too far. His ability awakens, Predation. The bully cannot believe his eyes. This loser. Did he really just awaken now? And this aura? It's not normal. In that instant, fear grips the redhead. Tay Hyun feels he can control this power with ease. When the bully attacks, Tay Hyun calmly raises a single hand. He blocks the attack. The tables have turned. The loser from before is gone. The bully's attack dissolves as Tay Hyun's energy surges into him. The aftershock is felt from a distance. The explosion catches the other students completely by surprise. Back at the scene, Tay Hyun is left standing, while the bully is now the one on the ground. The system then sends a notification, Predation complete. A new ability has been registered. Stone Skin can now be used. And what a good boy our protagonist is. The school nurse is left speechless. One student is bringing in 3 others for treatment. He tells her these guys had an accident. The woman is dumbfounded, wondering if a meteor fell on them. Yuku's face is now purple enough to match his red hair. Nearby, the nurse tends to Tay Hyun's broken fist. When she asks how they really got hurt, he claims they all fell down the stairs together. Later, completely healed, Tay Hyun is lost in thought. Where did this predation ability even come from? He's been a ranka for nearly his whole life, and after one fight, he's already a ranky. He's also just discovered he can steal abilities from other hunters. This is completely unprecedented, this power, his regression. Right now, everything is a mystery. So, it's time to search for answers. He finally arrives at his house. It's been years since he's seen it, at least in his memories, and he looks at it with a sense of nostalgia. He remembers that after his parents died, he came to live with his uncle. A small smile forms on his face. He goes inside thinking he should look for more information before his uncle gets home. When he gets to the living room, he sees something. 3 unfamiliar guys are there with his cousin. He asks his cousin why he isn't at school, but then his eyes go wide as he realizes what's happening. The box his cousin is opening is full of money, and memories from his past life come flooding back. He remembers this. His cousin wanted to hang out with delinquents, so he stole all the money from the house and made a huge mess. The bullies ask who he is. Wang Jae tells them he's his cousin. The blonde one threatens Kim Tay Hyun, telling him to stay out of their business. He puts a hand on his head, trying to act superior, but the boy shows no fear. In fact, he's excited. This is a chance to test his new powers. The blonde bully doesn't even have time to react to the punch coming his way. A single punch from Kim Tae-hyun sends him flying to the ground. He almost blacks out from the impact. Hang and the other 2 guys are completely shocked. Kim Tae-hyun raises his hand, ready to activate his power. The blonde throws his arms up to protect himself. He's terrified, expecting some kind of fireball to shoot out. Kim Tae-hyun is excited too, but a voice in his head tells him the skill-stealing ability is currently inaccessible. The blonde looks on, confused why no attack is coming. And Kim Tae-hyun is just as surprised that Predation didn't activate. While he's distracted, a punch comes right at him. One of the other guys took the opening and landed a solid hit. The force of the blow throws him to the ground. The blonde, still on the floor, orders the other 2 to attack. One of them shoots out some kind of energy beam. The other one breathes out a cloud of poison, and the blonde uses his thorn ability from the ground. All 3 attacks head right for him. Kim Tae-hyun is surprised by how fast they are. Suddenly, a huge pressure erupts from the 2nd floor of the house. They all watch as the purple poison smoke spreads. The blonde starts taunting him, thinking they've already won. But then he notices something in the middle of the smoke. The crimson aura is back, shining right through it. The presence of a hungry predator starts to form around Kim Tae-hyun. He's annoyed that his ability just comes and goes whenever it wants instead of when he commands it. The 3 delinquents are frozen, shaken by what they're seeing. He lunges forward, his fist covered in stone, and smashes it into the blonde's face. He can feel the overwhelming power of his ability, and he loves it. A few moments later, the fight is over. He looks down, satisfied at the unconscious bodies. The delinquents are on the ground. That's when he discovers the attribute window is only visible to him. It details his abilities, but some information is missing. For example, it doesn't mention the activation conditions for predation. The window also doesn't say anything about its passive effect, the one that nullifies other abilities. He keeps thinking, running other ideas through his mind. But he decides to put those thoughts aside for now. He sees his cousin kneeling on the ground, apologizing. Hung Jae-young says he's reflecting on his reckless actions after seeing how impressive he was. He promises to be his subordinate and follow any order he's given. While the young man is talking, Kim Tay Hyun thinks about what to do with the other incident from today. He says he forgives his cousin who stands up looking sly, but in exchange for forgiveness, he has to come with him to do something. At an abandoned train station, warning signs are posted in front of the main gate. 3 agents are staring ahead, completely stunned. A portal is about to break. This is when monsters from the abyss open a path to reality. If it's not stopped, it can be worse than any natural disaster. The agents say the last portal break was 10 years ago, and these monsters are spreading way too fast. An assistant asks if they should start evacuating the neighborhood, but the supervisor, a B rank with a barrier ability, tells him no. According to their measurements, the portal is rank C, so the strongest monster inside should also be rank C. While the agent boasts about his power, monsters force their way through the barrier, and they manage to break it. The leader reacts instantly to the monsters behind him. With a single kick, he takes off a Cyclops' head and says that his B-rank awakeners, they are more than enough to handle this. Hang Jae-hyung runs after his cousin, asking if those agents will be okay since they seem pretty strong. He keeps making the same point as they run towards the train station. Kim Tay Hyun agrees that B-rank agents should have no problem with C-rank opponents. His cousin complains that this is exactly what he was talking about. But Kim Tay Hyun says that would only be true if the portal was actually rank C, which shocks him. The area around the portal is already full of dead monsters. The group leader looks at the bodies, wondering how C-rank monsters broke his B-rank barrier. He turns back to the gate and realizes the mana flowing out is much stronger than he estimated. Then, more creatures start to emerge. The creatures touch the barrier, and it cracks instantly. The 3 agents just stare speechless. The monsters shatter the barrier, and the sheer power of the blast disorients the men. They pour out of the portal entrance heading for the city. The huge monster that broke through was a giant rank ogre. The leader is stunned, realizing the portal isn't rank C, it's rank A, and a massive explosion rips through the entire station. Hwang Jae-hyun asks his cousin how he could have known. Kim Tae-hyun has no way to explain it, so he just says it was his intuition. In front of them, a crowd of people is running for their lives from the monsters chasing them. A woman at the front of the crowd yells for everyone to run because it's a portal break. Hang Jae-hyun looks shocked that his cousin was right, and Kim Tae-hyun tells him to do what he was asked to do earlier. His cousin asks what he's going to do in the situation. He just says he'll take care of the monsters himself and meet up with him later. The city is lit up by buildings at night. A man reports on the portal break, saying they can't send reinforcements because no one is available. He adds that the only solution to this crisis is an A-rank awakener. So he turns to the man behind him, an A-rank awakener, and asks for his help. His name is Hyunu, but they call him the Lunatic Blade. He tells everyone not to worry because their hero has arrived. His greatest specialty was his 8th grade syndrome. Kim Tae-hyun crushes a monster's head. He smashes another one in the jaw, and he drives his fist straight through a third one's chest. His combination of attacks brings them all down. He then activates his Predation ability. A wave of power blasts away all the monsters near him. Kim Tae-hyun looks over the scene, satisfied. He just figured something new out. He realizes the reason his ability was failing is because of fatigue. If his fatigue goes over 70%, he can't use it anymore. Most abilities run on mana, but he has to worry about something else, too. Fatigue is just as important. It builds up when he uses his powers or just moves around. The higher it gets, the weaker his abilities become, and the heavier his body feels. As he uses Predation on the dead monsters, he finds out he can get his mana back without actually spending any. It not only recovers his strength, but it also increases the rank of his abilities. He realizes that the more he uses Predation, the more powerful it can become. He starts dreaming of reaching the high ranks, maybe even SS rank or becoming the first ever SSS. He finishes off the last of the monsters in the area. Then he looks back, sensing someone else is there. He sees another awakener nearby, killing monsters and shouting about avenging the souls they killed. The man declares himself a warrior of justice, calling himself Haeun-soo. Kim Tae-hyun has no idea what this guy is all about. The man raises his sword. He uses it to counter an ogre charging right at him. In an instant, his blade glows with light. He unleashes a flurry of quick cuts on the monster, and Kim Tae-hyun is stunned by the display of power. He realizes right away that this must be the awakener who solved the portal break. Before the regression, he just stands there admiring the man's skill. While the other guy boasts about it, it just reinforces the image Tae-hyun already had of him. but he starts to wonder why the man is even here. Before the regression, Hyun-soo was supposed to be fighting in a different city. The warrior of justice then begins to pray for the souls of the dead he's found. Before he can figure out what's going on, an attribute window warns him of an incoming ability. He's startled by the vision he suddenly has. Someone comes up from behind and stabs him through the heart. He spits up blood, unable to see the person behind him, and the assassin just laughs, having taken out his target. The city is a wreck from all the monster chaos. Inside a clothing store, the air is quiet. Won Jae-young watches the nurse lying on the ground. She seems to be in a deep sleep. He steels himself, remembering what Kim Tae-hyun told him. His cousin had said a lot of people would die tonight, and that the nurse would be one of them. The news had surprised him. Apparently, she was just relaxing instead of evacuating, and that's how she died. Using his sleep ability, he was able to put the nurse to rest and carry her to safety. Kim Tae-hyun had promised he would take care of everything else. He still wonders how his cousin knew all of this. And then the pieces start to connect in his mind. He questions it, but all the evidence points to one thing. He thinks his cousin must have awakened an ability to see the future. He can't help but think how incredible that is. He was sure nothing would go wrong with his cousin's prediction, but he still looks nervously at the scene. Meanwhile, the other man has somehow escaped the invisible assassin's grasp. Pressing on the wound to stop the bleeding, he demands to know who attacked him. The assassin is surprised he survived a blow to a vital point. But then again, that's what you'd expect from a rank A awakener. Han-do looks thrilled by the challenge. People call awakened who commit crimes villains, and this guy is a rank B. He's also a known maniac who kills people during dungeon breaks. But Kim Tae-hyun is sure these two never met in his past life. He wonders if his regression is the reason things are different now. And Han-do yells angrily at the villain in front of him. He activates his light sword and charges forward. But then a strange noise comes from the ground. Below them, there's still a monster that hasn't been killed. The monster attacks all three of them, roaring with anger and pain. The two are surprised by the ogre's ability to regenerate, so they back away. The creature charges its fist with power. It throws the punch, causing massive destruction all around. The villain decides to let the monster handle on Hyun-soo. He then looks back at his other prey. He says he didn't expect to have a spectator. He gets excited and points his daggers at Kim Tae-hyun. Kim Tae-hyun is surprised by the villain's speed. The dagger is just inches from his body. Before the blade can pierce his skin, he defends himself with his ability. Kim Tae-hyun then kicks the villain away. The villain is surprised, realizing the boy isn't awakened. Kim Tae-hyun says he knows who he is, calling him a lunatic who uses stealth to kill people. He adds that he's happy to have finally found him. The two clash, exchanging fierce blows. Kim Tae-hyun swings his arm to hit the villain's head, but the man backs away and blocks the hit. With each impact, the villain's daggers get more and more damaged. They strike at the same time again, and the villain compliments Kim Tae-hyun's skills, saying his ability is pretty effective for defense. While they fight, and Hyun-soo is still dealing with the giant ogre. He yells for Kim Tae-hyun's attention, announcing that he's about to use his ability. In an instant, the villain disappears. Kim Tae-hyun stays on high alert. He knows his opponent can turn invisible. He quickly turns to block an attack from behind, but he hits nothing. Then the villain reappears. At the last second, Kim Tae-hyun manages to block with his arm, but he's still cut as the attack actually slices through his stone layer. The villain, Han-do, says he's killed plenty of people with abilities like his. He moves so fast he leaves after images, attacking from every direction. The sheer number of attacks forces Kim Tae-hyun to fall back. With a final powerful attack, Han-do violently stabs him, gasping and covered in wounds. Kim Tae-hyun realizes a weakness in his ability he never saw before. A strong enough hit crushes the stone, and the new layer that replaces it is much weaker. Han-do was counting on this weakness from the very beginning. But even so, Kim Tae-hyun hasn't lost hope. He wonders out loud if it's time to end this. Han-do figures Kim Tae-hyun has finally gone crazy from all the hits. Then Kim Tae-hyun asks if he knows why he was so desperate to find him. This just confuses Han-do even more. The familiar crimson aura starts to appear around him. He reveals the real reason he was looking for Han-do. The heavy atmosphere makes the villain a little uneasy, but he's not scared. So Han-do tries the same tactic again, creating after images all around Kim Tae-hyun. But this time Kim Tae-hyun says he's found the weakness in his stealth. He figured it out while fighting monsters. A lot of them got out of his line of sight, but his ability always found them. It didn't matter where they hid or ran, Predation always reached them. The crimson aura chases Han-do even while he's invisible, and it tears him to pieces once again. The sun begins to rise, and Hyun-soo is lying on the ground. He's completely exhausted from his fight with the villain. He realizes that even a hero of justice like him can't escape death. A giant ogre is still standing right in front of him. The monster throws a powerful punch. It's aimed right at the spot where Hanu is lying. The ogre waits for the dust to clear, expecting to see blood, but there's nothing there. Kim Tay Hyun is surprised by how worn out the ogre looks. He had saved Hanu at the very last second. Later that day, a couple opens their door, surprised by who they see. It's their son and nephew, finally home. Their eyes fill with tears of joy. They were worried sick that monsters had killed them, but their son just says that nothing happened. The man points out that the house is a mess, like someone turned it upside down. And again, Hang Hun nervously insists that nothing happened. Meanwhile, a news report is playing on a cell phone. It says the portal break was completely resolved that morning, but as a precaution, schools will be closed for a week. News of more survivors is coming in, and the cleanup team sent to the portal is being treated at the hospital. The school nurse says she just fell asleep and suddenly woke up somewhere else. In an interview, the only guild president on the scene says he wasn't the hero who saved everyone. It was someone else. However, the giant ogre's body was never found, and the identity of the villain who attacked the city is still a mystery. People are realizing the security measures weren't enough. Watching the news, Kim Tay Hyun is just glad his name wasn't mentioned. He finally stops walking, having reached his destination. He now has 3 abilities, with stealth being the newest one. But at his current level, it's hard to use all 3 because he doesn't have enough mana. If he uses too much, he gets tired out way too fast. He remembers the only solution for that: potions. Potions are basically elixir made to do things like recover mana and fight fatigue. The problem is potions are really expensive. That's why he's come to this abandoned area. His plan is to hunt, but to do that legally, he needs a license to use his abilities in public. And since he can't use his powers in public, his only option is to explore undiscovered dungeons like this one. After making his way through a narrow corridor, he comes across huge bug-like creatures and giant spiders. The humanoid ones are smart enough to talk, and they start mocking him. He realizes their power is comparable to a B rank, but even a few of them aren't enough for him to level up. The spider sisters take the insult personally and start to attack. They all fill their mouths with venom. Then they fire it all at him in a combined assault, already sure of their victory. But his predation ability makes the venom useless, leaving him almost completely unharmed. The 3 of them are stunned. It's the first time a human has ever resisted their poison. Intense screams echo through the abandoned railway, and his attribute window confirms his success in stealing their paralysis ability. The Korean Players Association is housed in a massive skyscraper. 2 guards stand watch outside a meeting room. 3 people are waiting inside, one of whom is Go from the association. The other 2 are the best players in all of Korea. A player is the official term for an awakened who is legally allowed to use their powers for things like exploring and clearing dungeons. Right now, there are only 5 top-ranked players in the New Players Association. Among all the guilds, the 4 best are the Indivisible Fighters, the Alchemist Artisans, the Wizards Sorcerers, and the Informant Wanderers. And the organization that controls these 4 guilds and all other players is the Players Association. Sitting across from Ga Tae-wook is the Guild Master of the Wanderers, Yua. Next to her is the President of the Players Association, Cheap Chini. Both of them are S-rank players. The President asks Huang if she's found anything on the Evil Guild. The Evil Guild is a criminal organization made up of the most ruthless awakened criminals. You can always spot their members by the gold rings they wear, each with 3 skulls on it. She hands over some papers detailing the guild's movements and a list of their targets. Then she says she knows that isn't the only reason she was called here. The president immediately asks for her opinion on the case. Confused, she doesn't understand what he means. He asks when she took her player test, and she tells him she was 19. And just like that, she understands what he's getting at. The president smiles, impressed that she figured out he was talking about the high school student who faced a rank monster. Back in the spider cave, not a single monster is left alive. Only Kim Tay Hyun remains, sitting on a pile of their corpses. Surrounded by magic crystals from all the monsters he killed, he calls one of the 4 major guilds, the alchemist, to buy some potions. The school finally reopens and the students return to class. Over the next week, Kim Tay Hyun keeps busy with physical training. He also explores other undiscovered dungeons. He even makes a trip to the Alchemist Guild headquarters. There, he exchanges all his mana stones for potions and gets treated like a VIP. He also increases all of his attributes and raises his abilities to rank C. Now, he just rests his head in his hand while the other students watch him from a distance. Everyone has heard the rumors about him beating the bullies and awakening his powers. One student scoffs, thinking his awakening can't be that big of a deal. A group of them starts walking towards his classroom. He notices them coming. They throw chairs aside to clear a space. The group gathers in front of him. Their leader puts his feet up on the table. His name is Lee Young-I, and he's a rank S. He activates his intimidating aura. This guy is the son of the CEO of the Tasa Group conglomerate. That's the same group that sponsors the school, and he's the leader of all the bullies. He was the one who abused his authority, and the main person picking on Tay Hyun. So Tay Hyun finally asks him why he even calls himself a friend. And in response, he unleashes his own powerful aura. One of the bullies behind them calls him out for being disrespectful. But Lee Jong-I just turns and punches the guy. That was his punishment for interrupting their conversation. Tay Hyun doesn't even flinch, so the leader starts releasing his own power, trying to intimidate him for the disrespect. Tay Hyun is actually impressed by the level of magic. It's exactly what you'd expect from an S-rank awakener. He discreetly puts his hand in his pocket, getting ready. He wonders how the other guy will react to his predation skill. But before they can actually fight, they're interrupted. Limon steps in, putting out Lee Young's fire with her ice powers. She just warns Tay Hyun not to take it any further. Lim had a lot of titles: class president, rich girl, UAS half-sister, Shrank awakener, and the list goes on. And it looked like she'd only get more titles in the future. Her only real problem was that she was completely inflexible. So, true to her nature, she confronts Lee Jong-I. He asks her what she means, claiming he was just talking to his friend. She asks why he punched the guy on the floor if they're friends, and that just makes him furious. He tells her to shut her mouth. She fires back, telling him to leave or she'll make him. Meanwhile, Tay Hyun is just wishing they'd both stop because their drama is going to cause a scene. The two of them just stare each other down. In the end, Lee Young-A decides to be the one to leave. But as he turns, he powers up for a surprise flame attack. Just then, the school bell rings and an announcement makes everyone freeze. The broadcasting club announces a special lecture from the Players Association. All students are told to gather in the main hall immediately. The announcement repeats, and Lee Young-A seems surprised to hear the Players Association is at the school. He powers down and glances over at Lim Yong and Tay Hyun. She's still ready for a fight, but he's just sitting there quietly. Lee Young-A just gives an excited smile and leaves the room. He tells them they got lucky this time. She waits until the door is closed before she finally relaxes. Then she turns to look at Tay Hyun, but he's not in his chair anymore. He's already at the door, asking if she didn't hear the announcement. She turns back confused. She didn't even see him move. She wonders if he was always like this. A little later, everyone is gathered in the main hall. The students are all wondering what this lecture is about. The microphone clicks on and a man introduces himself as Tay Wook. He's the vice manager of the association's HR department, and he says they're here for two reasons. First, to address the association's slow response to the recent portal break and to provide safety training. And second, to announce changes to the player test for the students, the future of the association. Hearing this, Lee Jong-I silently curses Tay Hyun's name. Lim Ong makes a mental note to talk to Tay Hyun later, and Tay Hyun just sits there looking bored and sleepy. Everyone was wondering what the player test had to do with students who weren't even 19 yet. Wook explains that because of the portal break, a secret decision was made. With the number of monsters and dungeons on the rise, the association is short on staff. So now they're going to start testing students while they're still in high school. The news shocks everyone. Tay Wook says students will be chosen based on grades, academic records, and behavior. But Tay Hyun knows that's a complete lie. In fact, the selection process has already started. Tay Wook has an ability called Observer's Eye. This power lets him measure the total sum of a person's abilities. He can even see their attribute window just by focusing on them. And he's impressed by the numbers he sees in the hall. He thinks the potential here is much better than in other places he's visited. And among all these candidates, a few really stand out to him. There's Lee Young-Guy with a score of 1,924, and Lim A with 2,335. He remembers the Wanderer sent a list of recommendations, but he can't believe there are so many untrained awakeners here. A smile spreads across his face. Then Lee Young-Guy raises his hand, in everyone's attention. He asks if candidates who aren't a good fit will still have to take the test. This gets the vice manager's attention. Wook explains that the tests are meant to find suitable players among those who have awakened. Lee Young-Guy adds that people who haven't awakened have no right to even be at this lecture. He's clearly talking about Tay Hyun. To become a player, a complex set of abilities needs to be evaluated. Lee Jong-ji keeps talking, making his point. His goal is obviously to humiliate Tay Hyun, and he gets a few laughs from the other students. Tay Hyun realizes the other boy is dead, set on confirming whether he's awakened or not. He just stares back as if waiting for proof. Lim doesn't agree with what's happening, but then she remembers how rude Tay Hyun was earlier. That makes her hesitate. And just then, Wook says it's up to each student to decide if they want to participate. Lee Jong-gai keeps provoking Tay Hyun, saying he knows he's right, and that Tay Hyun can't take the test if he can't prove he's awakened. But Tay Hyun knows the observer's eye can be used on him, and he could get a recommendation without doing a thing. From a distance, Wook watches the students. He thinks Lee Jong-gai's behavior is pathetic, just tormenting someone for no reason. Then his eyes turn to Tay Hyun. The observer's eye can't read his information. The vice manager is completely shocked by this. Just then, Tay Hyun starts to challenge Lee Jong-gai, confusing everyone watching. He says he'll take the lecture from here and flips the middle finger at him. This bold move makes Lee Jong-gai furious. Wook still can't believe his ability isn't working. It's never failed before, not even on the association's president or the Wanderers Guild master. Tay Hyun starts to leave the hall. Can't figure out why his ability won't work on a kid like him. A few steps from the door, the boy stops. The vice manager tries again and again to use his ability on him, but it fails every time. Then Tay Hyun turns around and seems to allow his ability to be checked. Wook is instantly stunned. A terrifying aura surrounds the boy, and the power level above his head is over 5,000. Sometime later that day, Tay Hyun is in the library reading through a pile of books. He's searching for clues about the king, but he's interrupted by the same group of bullies he beat before. They tell him Lee Jang-gae is looking for him, and that he needs to get up. He just challenges them, refusing to follow their orders. They go quiet for a moment, but then they mention his aunt's restaurant, which shakes him a little. He takes his eyes off the books and looks up. One of them says their leader sent a message, calling him a pathetic orphan. They say he only causes trouble for his family. But the bully talking doesn't even see the attack coming. The force of the blow makes the whole library explode. All the bookshelves are completely destroyed. The bully is held by the neck, his mouth already bleeding. The other two are knocked out just as easily. Then Tay Hyun simply asks where he can find Lee Jong-gai. Later in the main hall, a lecture has just ended and the place is empty. Lee Jong-gai and his bodyguard are waiting for Tay Hyun to arrive. When he shows up, the bodyguard is a little surprised. He's been continuously casting negative status abilities on the boy, but because of Tay Hyun's oppressive aura, none of them have any effect, and the bodyguard suspects he's awakened. Lee Jong says he called him for a conversation, but Tay Hyun doesn't respond. He continues saying he doesn't want to threaten him. He wants to recruit him. He reveals his plan to create a guild, but Tay Hyun still says nothing. Lee Jong-gai says he wants to recruit other geniuses to work for him. He points at Tay Hyun as if acknowledging his talent. He tells him to forget their past issues and promises to bring his family fortune and honor. He says he'll lift them out of the mud. Tay Hyun finally speaks. He just says he's talking a lot of nonsense. He activates his ability and gets ready to fight. His stone skin forming completely. He's ready to punch him in the face. And for a moment, Lee Jong-gai seems disoriented, but he recovers quickly, thinking to himself that dogs need to be trained to obey. Then he activates his fire powers. The bodyguard puts a hand on the ground, forming a magic circle. He uses an ability to create a magical room that prevents anyone outside from detecting what's happening. The entire floor, walls, and ceiling are coated in magic. The bodyguard says that now no one can interrupt their fight. As soon as the room is formed, the two of them start fighting. Tay Hyun pulls back his stone arm, ready to throw a punch. Lee Jong-gai covers his own fist in flames. Their fists collide, creating a huge explosion of energy. The flames are stronger than the stone, shattering his arm into pieces. Pain shoots through Tay Hyun's entire arm, but Lee Jong-gai is already preparing a flaming kick. The kick sends Tay Hyun flying straight into a wall. The impact and the heat from the flames cause serious internal injuries. Lee Jong-gai just enjoys showing off how much stronger he is. The bodyguard simply watches the show. He actually feels a little sorry for the kid fighting his young master. But Tay Hyun emerges from the flames and charges forward again. Lee Jong-gai blocks the attack and immediately gets ready to counter. He raises a hand loaded with fire, aiming it right at him. He unleashes an explosion of fire right in Tay Hyun's face. The bodyguard keeps watching calmly, but then he notices something he's never seen before. After the blast, the flames die down, and just like that, Tay Hyun recovers and strikes back with another stone blow. He starts to overpower Lee Jong-gai, and they both throw a punch at the same time. But Tay Hyun's fist connects first, sending the young master flying. The bodyguard can't believe it. His young master was just overpowered by sheer brute force. Lee Jung-gi struggles to get back on his feet. He asks what Kim Tay Hyun did to him, why his body won't move. The bodyguard is shocked to hear that his body is paralyzed. He realizes physical strengthening isn't Kim Tay Hyun's only skill. Kim Tay Hyun is thrilled. His paralysis ability actually worked. The ability can pierce through high-rank resistances. Stealth is useless against long-range fire attacks and predation. So, the plan was to build up paralysis through close combat instead. He figured out that the status effects from abilities are stronger in direct attacks. That's why the damage from his last attack stacked with all the previous ones was finally enough to get through his opponent's high-rank resistance. The bodyguard is speechless. He's watching his young master lose. He thinks to himself that Kim Tay Hyun is a genius, but the fight isn't over yet. Lee Young-hwa is on the ground completely paralyzed. He admits he underestimated his opponent, then pulls a purple crystal from his pocket. He crushes the crystal in his hand. A giant made of fire forms in front of Kim Tay Hyun. Lee Jung-gi announces he's going to fight for real now as the flames around him burn even hotter. He shoots forward, propelled by his flames. The fire titan throws a powerful punch, but it misses by a hair. Kim Tay Hyun shouts up at the massive titan. His body is completely covered in stone as he prepares to punch back. But the titan counters with a blast of fire from its mouth. Their attacks clash in the middle of the room. The flames slowly start to eat away at the rock armor. The stone protection shatters. Kim Tay Hyun is thrown back by the force of the explosion, crashing hard to the ground. The bodyguard watches it all unfold, recognizing the titan as the true form of the young master's Heart of Fire ability. That purple crystal was a mana amplification stone made from refined monster cores. Thanks to that stone, Lee Jung-gi can now use the full power of his ability. But the bodyguard is worried about more than just the stone. He yells at the young master to stop, warning him that he'll kill Kim Tay Hyun. He also warns him that it's too much power to handle, his blood vessels could burst. From the mana surge, a blast of fire shoots towards the bodyguard, exploding right where he was standing, barely missing him. The young master is furious that his own subordinate is giving him orders. He says he won't let some piece of trash humiliate him like that. Kim Tay Hyun has barely recovered from the last attack, and he's immediately struck by the full fury of the fire titan. The young master laughs hysterically, thinking he's killed him. The bodyguard runs to stop him from going too far and to help Kim Tay Hyun. He reaches a hand into the crater to help him up, but he gets a punch to the face for his trouble. The blow sends him flying, spitting blood. Kim Tay Hyun asks what he's talking about since he's the one who started this fight. He then drinks several restoration potions. He's preparing to get serious, unleashing his predatory aura. Meanwhile, in the Korean Players Association building, the vice manager is giving a report in the president's office. He's shocked by the incredibly high numbers for D students. Lee Young-gi with 1,900 and Lee Mei-young with 2,300. The vice manager says these two are S-rank awakeners. The other agents can't believe it, an untrained S-rank with potential comparable to Japan's Saint. The Saint is one of Japan's top players whose power was over 2,500 at her first inspection when she was 19. And in this case, Lim Ah-young's power is already approaching that number. The vice manager is even more astonished when he remembers Kim Tay Hyun's number, 596. He wonders if it was an evaluation error or maybe a problem with the reading. He leaves the president's office with the other agents, determined to find Kim Tay Hyun again. He needs to confirm his doubts in person. Back at the fight, the bodyguard looks on in disbelief. He can't trust what he's seen. The predatory ability is actually suppressing the powerful fire titan. The young master tries to break free, not understanding how Kim Tay Hyun is doing this. He can't believe he's being overpowered by someone he thought was weaker. He shouts that he's an heir and a powerful S-rank. Kim Tay Hyun asks what difference it makes if he's an heir or what his rank is. Then he puts a little more power into his ability. The king's power takes shape above the decaying scarlet vines. They devour Lee Young's titan form. The sheer force of the power destroys the entire court. The whole gym is left in ruins. Lee Jong-bae is lying unconscious on the ground. The bodyguard is trembling. Kim Tay Hyun looks ahead surprised. The bodyguard protected his young master, throwing himself in front of him at the last second. He managed to pull him away from the attack just in time. The bodyguard asks what he plans to do now and how he'll handle the consequences. Kim Tay Hyun asks how he can act so bold after getting involved in the fight himself. The bodyguard states he isn't the type of man to run from a threat like this. Kim Tay Hyun denies that he was planning to kill Lee Jong-bae, but he insists that he deserves fair compensation for having his life threatened. The bodyguard's face turns pale when Kim Tay Hyun suggests 1 billion won would be enough to keep the heir Lee Jong-bae alive. Outside the gym, students have gathered, drawn by the explosion. Everyone is wondering if it's a villain attack, but Lim Aeon recognizes those flames. She frowns, thinking of Lee Youngbae. A memory of him bullying her flashes through her mind. The nurse tries to calm everyone down, but Lima Young runs past them all heading for the gym. The nurse is surprised to see her running. She's just a few meters from the door, regretting that she just stood by and watched those two in the gym without doing anything. She runs right through the flames, entering without any fear. She just hopes that Kim Tay Hyun didn't die in the explosion. Then the scene she saw earlier plays out differently in her mind. In this version, she has no reaction while he talks to her. She asks him how he defeated Lee Youngbae, but Kim Tae-hun doesn't want to explain, just saying he fell down the stairs. The lie is completely obvious, and he asks her to handle the situation alone, without telling anyone what she saw. Then he quickly leaves the area. Lim Yong yells after him, demanding to know what really happened, but when she turns to face him, he's already gone. She doesn't understand how he could have disappeared so fast. Meanwhile, Kim Tae-hyun reappears far away from the gym. He figures Lim will handle the situation and notes that the Tan group has already taken their cut of his reward. He turns to look at his status window, where a new ability and a new attribute have been added. He has 5 points in the Charm attribute and a new ability called Monarch's Heart that can strengthen his party members. He's a little annoyed to get an attribute common to celebrities like Lee Youngbae, but he's happy about the new ability. He knows that abilities that strengthen a group are rare, and for someone like him who uses a lot of different skills, Monarch's Heart is really useful because it works with any other ability. As he's celebrating his new power, a group of black cars pulls up in front of him. The man who gets out of the car says he's pleased to finally meet him. The vice manager says he has a lot of questions for him. Kim Tae-hyun wonders how the man found him at this exact spot, back at the mansion of Lee Youngbae's father. The man is informed that his only son is in the hospital. He's also told that the attacker is demanding 1 billion won for his son's life. Nearby, his hunting dogs bark fiercely. A bodyguard trembles with fear in front of his boss. He apologizes and says he has nothing to report. The boss tells him to do whatever Kim Tae-hyun asks, which completely surprises the bodyguard. The boss then mocks his own son, saying that Kim Tae-hyun is a brave kid. He lifts his right hand from the armrest of his chair and snaps his fingers. It's a signal for his other subordinates to enter, and the bodyguard recognizes the men who walk in. He shouts at his boss, reminding him that the opponent is still just a kid. He says the boss is being too cruel, but the man just tells him to shut up, saying he won't tolerate a dog barking at him. Lee Jong-soo gives a cruel smile to the subordinates standing before him. Back in the present, the vice manager asks what he did in the gym. Kim Tae-hyun wonders which of the two recent events the man is talking about. He considers the chances of the manager getting involved in his problem with Lee Jong-bae. With few options, he decides to take a chance and asks if he's talking about the explosion. The vice manager seems surprised by the question. He looks back and says he'll deal with that another time. Kim Tae-hyun realizes the vice manager doesn't know about his involvement in the explosion. A smile spreads across his face. He asks if they don't already know what he did. After leaving the man confused, Kim Tae-hyun says he knows they came to invite him to take the player test. He's careful not to reveal how he knows this. Then Kim Tae-hyun reveals his aura. The number 5,214 appears above his head, and he says it's because of the huge number displayed right there. The vice manager is astonished and can't believe his eyes. Seeing the numbers increase, he's sure Kim Tae-hyun's power is real. Then he asks another question, pointing out what happened to his clothes. Kim Tae-hyun finally notices how damaged they are. Back at Kim Tae-hyun's house, his cousin is shouting. He asks if Kim Tae-hyun is really going to take the player test and gets a yes. His cousin is completely stunned. He suddenly kneels before Kim Tae-hyun. He says the Taizan group will handle the gym, so all Kim Tae-hyun has to do is focus on training for the test in a month. Just then his phone on the table starts ringing. Outside the house, two people are waiting, wondering why the association is protecting some student. One of them, a man in a white mask, has just taken down an association agent. The other in a black mask keeps an eye on the house. They are a two-man assassination unit. They're known as the Black and White Brothers. The older one goes by Black, and he uses stealth and physical enhancement. The younger one is White, and his only ability is stealth from the roof. The man in the black mask laughs as he plans how he'll kill the kid inside. He turns to look at his brother, but he freezes when he sees his brother getting beaten. He quickly draws a hidden blade and demands to know who's attacking his brother. At that moment, Kim Tae-hyun lets go of the man in the white mask. The black-masked one had no time to react. He received a full knee strike from the one who was supposed to be his target. A few hours earlier in the gym, the bodyguard said he could make the decision to keep the event quiet and to hand over 1 billion won alone. Kim Tay Hyun said he wasn't evil enough to throw that duty on the minions, and asked him to get a good deal with his boss. Then he conjured a contract in the palm of his hand. The promise of the awakened. A contract created by magic, and breaking it would result in a random permanent penalty. The first condition of the contract was, besides providing 1 billion won, he also had to fix the gym incident. Live on the news, it was reported that the cause of the gym incident at the school was a gas leak, fulfilling the first part of the agreement. The second condition was to inform him in advance of any revenge actions against him. The black-masked one quickly launched an attack with his blade, something that was easily dodged by Kim Tay Hyun. He prepared his left hand and delivered a powerful punch forward. The black-masked one dodged upwards and prepared to counterattack. He attacked from behind but couldn't hit his target. He couldn't believe he missed that attack. From behind him, Kim Tay Hyun mocked the weakness of the assassins sent to kill him, saying they were nothing but their stealth abilities. On the street, a big black car was giving a ride to Yan. She called the president asking about the player test. She asked the president who will be observing her participation if it's Shin Yun-bok from Bususan or rank S. On the other end of the phone line, the president denies Wan's speculations. He said that Shin Yun-bok is a good candidate, but he is more interested in her sister Lyman. She says she doesn't appreciate the president's jokes. Then the president asks her who she is interested in. Yan says it was Shin Yun-bok, but another candidate caught her attention. She replies that their vice manager, Ga Wook, personally cornered a rank S. Kim Tay Hyun had already exterminated the two black and white masked assassins. Then he looks at his hand and realizes once again that he is having trouble using his predation power. The attribute window says that he is unable to use predation due to his physical incapacity. On the streets in front of Kim Hun's house, the black and white masked assassins were exposed on the street. Agents of the vice manager Ga Wook complain about the horrible conduct of attacking high school children by the assassins. Ga Wook thanks Kim Tay Hyun and asks if he knows who paid them to assassinate him. Surprised by the question, he decides not to tell, saying he doesn't know anything. Ga Wook wonders if the participant list was leaked. Kim Tay Hyun thinks it could be a problem if the Tang group knows too much about him, but he thinks they are the least of his problems now. He tries to exert control over his ability, but unfortunately, his physical capacity is insufficient to use it. He starts walking back home, while thinking about how to increase his status, to be able to use predation again. Predating monsters or awakened ones are flawed methods because they require using the ability. After pondering for a few moments, he realizes there is only one way. The next day at Blackhead Academy, the personal trainer Yura welcomes the new visitors to the academy, the training center of South Korea's new association. After introducing herself, she notices that the two are children. She starts to say that this place is not for children, but Kim Tay Hyun pulls out a black and gold card. Yura stares at the VIP card in his hand. She recognizes it as a card from the Alchemist Guild. She wonders about the identity of this boy who came to her today, worried about causing a problem if something goes wrong. A muscular figure appears to save Yura. The muscular man says that money is not enough to get in. This man was the Iron Man, not officially a player, but an awakened rank B. Wang Jae-hyung, confused by the situation, asked what they were going to do now. Meanwhile, a small group of bodybuilders watched the situation. The Iron Man, killer of rookies, had found his new prey. The muscular man continued posing. Kim Tay Hyun couldn't understand anything he was saying and commented that he was barking like a dog. This comment caught his attention. Wang, Hyun, and Yura were shocked at how rude he was being. He asked Kim Tay Hyun if he was calling him weak. He responds by asking if he wants to settle it with a bet. The loser pays for a year of the winner's membership. He laughs complacently at the challenge he imposed and accepts. Immediately, both are teleported to a virtual game field. Everyone in the academy watched the unfolding scene excitedly. Wang Jae-hyung asked what that game simulating the abyss was. Yura responds that it is a game program called the Virtual Portal. In the Virtual Portal, there is an exact replica of the abyss, and that is where the competition begins. The objective was to reach the finish line, carrying the most weight in the shortest time possible while eliminating rank B monsters. Along the way, this game was the most common way to establish a hierarchy in this academy. The Iron Man starts bravely advancing. He charges at various creatures. His muscle enhancement ability gave him immense advantage in combat against the creatures, and also improved his mobility and allowed him to carry a large amount of weight within the virtual world. Suddenly, he sees a light shining beside him. It was Kim Tay Hyun's advance overtaking him in an instant. 3 monsters appear to intercept him, but his mere advance was enough to pass through them. He prepares a powerful kick, and the monsters can't react. They can only watch him easily eliminate them. He kicks upwards and easily eliminates a group of monsters along the way. In his descent, he eliminates those he passed by. The virtual monsters can only see him arrive before they die. He sees the massive amount of points Kim Tae-hyun is scoring ahead of him. He is extremely shocked by this sight. Everyone else in the academy is also shocked. Only Wang Jae-hun is cheering for him. He turns his gaze to the Iron Man and thanks him for paying for a year's membership for him. Time passes and today is the day the player tests begin. Everyone was anxiously waiting for this opportunity. Journalists observed from a helicopter looking at all the candidates. The ones people were most eager to see were Iron Fist Hong Young-wook, the Druid Lee Gilson, the God of Thunder Shin Yun-bak, and the next, Saint Lim Ayong. Besides these, many other talents were expected to participate this time. Many others were also interested in watching this show. A young reporter was exhausted from the distance she had to travel. She was saddened because if she didn't cover this story, she would be fired. After seeing the immense number of people who came to see this exam, she didn't think she would be able to interview any of the awakened who would take the test. While she lamented lying on the ground, Kim Tae-hyun approached from behind the crowd. He wondered why there were so many people, and his voice caught the attention of reporter Kim Ji-ja. She quickly assumed Kim Tae-hyun might be a candidate. She sneaked behind him, asking if he would let her do an interview. A view from above showed the entire stadium. In the waiting room, Kim Tae-hyun was called minutes before the test began, almost late due to the interview he gave. He entered the closed room and found hundreds of people inside. Everyone was waiting for the test to begin. The closed walls made it hard to know the time. Some people's attention was drawn in one direction. Lima noticed a recognized person from afar. Kim Tae-hyun realized that she was also here for the test. The two greeted each other, and his increase in height didn't go unnoticed. She asked what he did with his body, and he replied it was just training. She stared at him again, wondering how he had changed so much in a month. Before she could ask what he did in the gym with Lee Young-bae, her voice was interrupted. Suddenly, many screens turned on showing silhouettes of the same person. The host said that the first test would begin, and that he would give the rules. The first rule is that everyone has a plate on their chest with a number on it. The objective of the first test is to collect 5 plates, and if you don't protect your own plate, you will be disqualified. He said the time limit is only 1 hour. The entire white room began to move and reshape. He finally finished by saying that all means and accessories could be used except for murder. Then he announced the start of the first test. Everyone was in random places in the completely random-shaped room. Everyone charged at Lima Young because she was rank S. She charged her powers in her palm. All the evaluators saw the great glacier she created. They were impressed with the talent of the next saint, but didn't forget to praise the high caliber of the other participants. Among all, one evaluator said he was particularly interested in one candidate on the screen beside Shin Yun-bak. The rank S hadn't let anyone approach him from the start. Most evaluators wondered how the clash between these two rank S powers would be. While Go Tae-wook watched a specific candidate alone. He understood the interest to rank S, but he knew the real star of today, and was confident that Kim Tae-hyun would stand out a lot. He looked energetically at his screen, but he saw him fighting only one candidate in a balanced way. Go Tae-wook couldn't believe his eyes. He couldn't help but exclaim loudly his irritation. The awakened rank Hong Jong-wook received a punch to his ironclad face. Kim Tae-hyun received back the blow he gave with his stone skin. Believing he had misjudged his abilities, Ga could only watch in disbelief through the screen. Then he realized he hadn't dodged any attack. Kim Tae-hyun and Hong Jong-wook advanced towards each other to continue their duel. He deliberately threw himself in front of the iron fist. The force of the blow easily broke his rocks. Hong Jong-wook shouted at Kim Tae-hyun, thinking he was underestimating him. He said that Kim Tae-hyun's ability was completely inferior to his own, and that he hadn't even bothered to dodge. Then a terrifying aura filled the air. Kim Tae-hyun felt his stats increasing during the duel. He charged forward with inhuman speed. He continued to receive external stimuli to tone his body. For him, fighting to the limit was just training, and he kept giving and taking blows. He put all the strength of his arm into one punch. In the collision of the attacks, Kim Tae-hyun emerged victorious, breaking the opponent's iron skin. He looked very pleased with his results. Hong Young-wook could only faint in the face of the powerful opponent's strength. He fell on his back to the ground without the slightest reserve of strength. Kim Tae-hyun stood looking over him. Ga-wook, who was watching the duel, couldn't help but be happy with his victory. He shouted alone in the room while the other evaluators looked at him strangely. But he worries that he might use too much stamina employing this method throughout the entire test. He starts to think that the best tactic would be to conserve his energy by targeting the weaker ones first. Then a shock catches him off guard when he sees on the screen All the other evaluators see a rank C awaken acting irresponsibly. Obviously, they were talking about Kim Tay Hyun, who was walking towards Shin Yeonbok after having eliminated dozens of people. They comment on his body covered in plates, saying he might be considered the strongest in the test. Kim Tay Hyun starts to count how many plates he has with him, but he stops because as long as he has more than 5 plates, it's enough. An electric aura erupts from the powerful competitor throughout the arena. The already immense aura further increased the release of his power. Kim Tay Hyun dodges an electric discharge. Shiny Yeonbok is delighted to see his enemy's speed. From the beginning of the test, he thought everyone was too weak to entertain him, with the only exception being Lim Ah-young, who is of the same rank as him. Shiny Yeonbok concentrates his discharges once again to attack. All 3 attacks were skillfully avoided by Kim Tay Hyun. He prepares with his stone skin on his foot. He is going to kick towards Shiny Yeonbok. The kick is immediately defended by electricity. Even Kim Tay Hyun was surprised by his defensive power, but Shiny Yeonbok praises him for being so fast that he couldn't see his attacks. The power erupts for him again, sending Kim Tay Hyun away from him. He is perplexed by how treacherous the God of Thunder is, possessing an ability capable of controlling lightning and a massive defense that allows him to stand still while attacking both at a distance and up close. His destructive power is not something to be underestimated by anyone. Kim Tay Hyun focuses on thinking of it that doesn't use Predation, which is currently unavailable, to break through his impenetrable defense. Shin Yeonbok sees that he isn't coming to him, so he asks if he wants him to advance as well. He is astonished to see him running so fast towards him. He charges an enormous amount of lightning into his hand for the attack. He narrowly dodges by turning his neck to the right. Then a charge kick is delivered, but is also successfully avoided. Hands charged with energy head towards him again. Numerous successive attacks from Shiny Yeonbok were made, even destroying the arena. He was having a lot of fun with the excitement of that battle. Then he grabs Kim Hun's hands and discharges all his lightning into him. He is paralyzed by the immense energy running through his body. Shiny Yeonbok shouts that he should be running if he wanted to withstand fighting him. Kim Tae-won grits his teeth and ignores the pain of the electric current passing through his body. He puts everything into making his stone arm grow, but the electric power breaks all the stones immediately. At the same time, it produces a Kim Tay Hyun raises his arms to cover his eyes, but Shin Yeonbok jumps to deliver his next electrifying attack with full force on him. His hand descends and a massive lightning bolt quickly strikes Kim Hun. The attack completely destroys the surrounding area. He could barely withstand the discharge of thousands of volts. Shin Yeonbok praises him for withstanding even this amount of energy release. He thinks in his mind that he is very happy to see a new toy so fun in this test. In Shin Yeonbok's moment of distraction, a rock comes flying towards him, hitting his forehead and snapping his head back. He is stunned by the blow to the head. Quickly, Kim Tae-in runs to his back and throws another rock at him, this time hitting his chest with force and precision, making even Shiny Yeonbok cough up blood. Stone Skin is not comparable to the God of Thunder's ability. Even at its best performance, it would end up shattered by his blows. But the test field is different. It is built of a material that can withstand the power of a first-class awakened, so it won't lose its shape even if it ends up cracking. So Kim Tae-hun's plan was to use the broken stones, small or large, he found along the way to attack Shin Yeonbok until he can overcome his enemy's supreme defense. Then he uses the large stone to strike with all his strength. He is built from a material capable of withstanding the power of a first-class awakened, so it won't lose its shape even if it ends up cracking. With the boy's defeat, the audience wonders how Rank S could lose to a Rank C and who Kim Hyun might be. Having defeated the boy, he collects the last pieces needed for the tournament, and now he only has to wait for the test to end. While distracted, he is hit by a surprise ice attack. Looking in the direction the spell was cast, he notices another spell of the same type, only larger, directly above him. At this moment, a girl named Lim Ah-young appears right in front of him, staying the girl so close. He feels confused and wonders why she was there and how long she had been watching them fight. However, as she approaches the protagonist, the girl says she believes that great power comes with great responsibility. For power without responsibility is merely violence, and she comments that Kim is very strong, but never imagined he would defeat Shin Yeonbok in that manner, and that he probably defeated Lee Jong-hai in the same way. Soon after, the girl exudes a chilling aura, her eyes glowing with a pale color as she uses her powers to cause massive destruction, aimed at the protagonist. In response, the protagonist remarks that the girl's snow resembled a bomb, making stealth or anything of the sort entirely useless. The girl then manages to strike him with an excellent blow. At that moment, she says that back in the gym, she believed in him, and that she thought he was different from other kids like Lee Young-hae, that he wouldn't act recklessly, driven solely by his self-interest. But after seeing him fight, she realized that in the end, it was all his fault. She then continuously strikes him with extremely powerful blows, leaving the protagonist in a tough situation. Afterwards, she states that the unauthorized use of abilities is a crime and that those two boys are still in the hospital. However, after everything he went through, she decides not to report him, but he must withdraw from the player test. She declares that he doesn't deserve to be a player. In turn, the protagonist gets up and asks her who she thinks she is to say all that because she wasn't even able to put an end to Lee Young-ji's tyranny. And even after saying all of that, all she really wants is to eliminate him. He then says he would have preferred her to use survival in the test as an excuse, instead of being so pathetic. Those words make the girl's facial expression change completely. She in turn declares that in that case, she won't go easy on him anymore. Next, she uses her power to create a massive ice staff and says she will eliminate him with it. At this moment, the protagonist realizes that after being shattered thousands of times, his stone skin has lost its functionality. Even if he uses stealth, he'll be detected by her area attacks, and the attribute boost granted by the monarch's heart is already active, but isn't enough to turn the tide. However, Predation is still sealed, and to make matters worse, he has no stamina to paralyze her, as he did with Lee Young-hae. So, in the end, he only has one chance left to win. The battle between the two continues, causing massive destruction in the arena. Amid the brilliant light emanating from the arena, the entire audience wonders what is happening, as they can't see anything at all. However, as the arena's light begins to dim, everyone is shocked by the scene they witness. The scene they see is the protagonist and the girl on the ground locked in a kiss. But it wasn't just a kiss. In reality, it was a paralysis ability. Status effect abilities that cause abnormal conditions at close range instead of long distance. And whether directly or indirectly, they have an extremely high chance of success. The protagonist infused paralysis into his blood and made her swallow it. But considering that a rank S possesses monstrous resistance, this was just a provocation. Nonetheless, the girl couldn't resist and became completely paralyzed. Then the protagonist's system notifies him that he caused immense psychological shock to his opponent. As a result, his charm increases by 3. At this moment, the announcer declares that the first round of the test has finally ended and that the medical team will move everyone to a safe place. So, they ask all participants to remain in their positions. After the first round of test was completed, all injured participants were promptly attended to by the medical team. However, even though Lim Ayan was paralyzed, she still possessed her test plaques and was competent in combat, thus passing the first round. As for the protagonist, despite only managing to collect 7 plaques, he unexpectedly defeated Shiny Yumbok and Lim Ayong. This made him the center of attention in the test at that moment. Thus, all the participants who saw him began to wonder about his rank, those he defeated, and even the tricks he might have used. Moments later, he analyzed his healed body, thinking that the healing abilities were great since he couldn't even walk in his previous state. Shortly after, Shin Yambok arrived, eager for a rematch against the protagonist. He told the protagonist that this time you wouldn't be able to use the same tricks he used inside the arena. As the rematch began, the young man released a massive amount of aura. As the fight started, several other players began watching, with one commenting that Shin Yambok was trying to get revenge for the previous fight. Meanwhile, another young man said he didn't care if Shin eliminated a candidate, but he should go all out and crush the protagonist. However, Shin became extremely irritated with them and told them they had nothing to do with this battle and should stay silent. Then, Shin Yambok declared he would show him that he was nothing without cheap tricks in a clean and fair fight. However, before the fight could start, everyone present, including the two of them, began to be pressed to the ground due to gravity magic. The man who cast his power started to approach, and as he did, he asked if the boys weren't going to let others rest. He added that they acted as if they didn't know their place. This man was the S-ranked player Park Seung-jin, one of the best players in the New Korea Association and a future S-ranked player. At this moment, the protagonist attempted to stand up despite the gravity, which left the man impressed as someone was still standing. However, he intensified his gravity magic, ensuring the protagonist couldn't rise under such pressure. The protagonist then thought he had heard that the abilities of an S-ranked awakened and an S-ranked player were on entirely different levels, but he hadn't expected it to be this different. Meanwhile, Player Park asked if he was withstanding all that pressure, noting that even veteran players couldn't endure so much. Before he could increase the pressure further, he was interrupted by the doctors responsible for the players. One of the doctors demanded to know what the hell he was doing to the kids who had just been treated, and whether he was trying to eliminate them all before the second round began. However, Park claimed he wasn't trying to eliminate them, but rather to control the situation. The doctor then accused him of lying, stating he knew Park did this every year to test the players' abilities. Meanwhile, unlike the other players who were completely unconscious due to Park's pressure, the protagonist managed to stand, leaving the men astonished. Impressed with the protagonist, Park asked for his name, to which he responded that he was Tay Hyun. Park then thought to himself that Kim must be a C-ranked player who defeated Shin Yanbok and Lim, and noted it had been a long time since someone had piqued his interest this much. Placing his hands on the protagonist's shoulder, he said it was clear he aimed to become an S-ranked player and asked if that was correct. He added that he would be waiting for him, and then left the area. However, the doctors began chasing after him, asking where he thought he was going after causing such a scene. Moments later, the players who advanced to the second round all found themselves in a forest where the S-ranked player Park was also present. He asked if everyone was ready after a brief rest, and then announced that they would begin the second round of the player license test. The final test was behind the portal they were about to enter. This portal led to a D-ranked dungeon, and he announced that every 5 participants who reached the dungeon through the portal would be allowed to explore it with him as their supervisor. They would be evaluated on all their actions during the dungeon exploration. Any necessary items such as weapons or supplies would be provided by the association. The protagonist thought to himself that the second round being a dungeon made sense, especially for an inexperienced amateur. There shouldn't be any problems as it's a R-ranked dungeon. Besides, active players will be with them unless it's a double dungeon called Apocalypse. Inside a R-ranked dungeon at the player testing site, the world's first double dungeon was discovered. This led thousands of people to shake hands with God, including the first group to discover it. This triggered dungeon breaks in countless undiscovered dungeons. So, he thinks it would be great if he could stop this with a simple warning. However, no one would believe his words without any proof. And even if they did, it might end up suspecting him. That would be embarrassing. But he'll have to deal with his own problems as long as he's not part of the first discovery group. He can find various ways to survive. Upon entering the dungeon, he realizes that he's now part of the exact group he didn't want to be in. The protagonist group's supervisor asks if everyone is Ray. The supervisor for the second round of test is an ranked player, Mahawk, the first person to discover the Apocalypse double dungeon. With a serious expression, the protagonist thinks he's in deep trouble. As they explore the dungeon, they encounter monsters but manage to defeat them with ease. The group's inspector applauds them for showing remarkable combat intuition. Even though it's their first real battle, he says they definitely have what it takes to become players. At this moment, a girl in the wild observing them, the protagonist wonders why out of all the teams, he ended up with the first discovery team, and he has no doubts about it. The ring Mahawk is wearing is the only item the first discoverer of the double dungeon was using. That is the Sage's Ring, a unique rank item that increases strength, stamina, speed, and mana by tenfold. At this moment, he thinks that the Apocalypse dungeon is definitely rank S, and if he falls into it, he won't have a chance to survive in his current state with Predation sealed. But it doesn't matter. He must ensure his doesn't find the Apocalypse. While walking through the dungeon, they end up in a place with 2 different paths. One of the group members asks the inspector what they should do in this situation. The inspector explains that this happens often in dungeons, so they should first consider a majority vote. However, the protagonist suddenly runs in one of the directions. Terrified, the inspector yells at him to come back, saying running like that in a dungeon is extremely dangerous. While running, Kim says it's fine and that they should follow that path. He then thinks about why he would let them decide this on their own. Clearly, he wasn't going to let that happen because he would make them take a path different from the one chosen in his regression. Something better than letting them find the Apocalypse. His plan is working. His entire group is following him. However, a portal with purple and pink hues appears right in front of him. Since they are inside a dungeon, the boy wonders how another portal could exist. The protagonist realizes that he has stumbled upon the double dungeon portal. All of his effort to keep his group from reaching it was completely in vain. To make matters worse, a member suggests they check what's inside the other portal. However, the protagonist commands everyone to stop right there and asks if they can't tell just by looking. After all, another portal different from the dungeon entrance is strange. No matter how you look at it, he insists they need to report this unusual incident before doing anything else and asks Mahawk if he agrees. Mahawk replies that it's indeed his first time seeing something like this, and that by the rules, Reporting it to HQ would be the right thing to do. However, he suggests they try it just this once. He says he understands what the protagonist means, but the mana he feels inside the portal, unlike its appearance, doesn't seem dangerous. Besides, it's just a rank D dungeon. Even if something happens, he as a rank player is present. He concludes that either the association prepared this portal or it's an extremely rare occurrence. Therefore, exploring this dungeon will earn them good points in the test. At this moment, the protagonist asked if Mhawk has lost his mind as he isn't acting according to the rules. However, Mulhook questions whether someone who doesn't even know how to work as a team should be saying that. Hearing these words from their inspector, the entire group turns against the protagonist's idea. After all, just moments ago, he was running carefree through the dungeon, ignoring all the danger. One of the boys in the group said that even if the protagonist was a little skilled, he shouldn't forget his place. Another boy remarked that he couldn't believe the protagonist was talking back to an active player, calling him arrogant. Since most of them decided to side with the inspector, they chose to enter this other portal. In an attempt to stop them from entering, the protagonist said he needed to speak to the inspector. However, with a snap of his fingers, the inspector filled the entire area with light. Upon entering the dungeon, the group noticed something strange and suspected that this was actually an S-rank dungeon. At the end of the corridor, they spotted a giant, terrifying statue holding an enormous sword. The group began questioning the inspector, asking what was going on and whether he was sure this was a D-rank dungeon. At that moment, the protagonist told everyone to be silent and instructed them to only look ahead. Hearing this, one of the group members commented that the protagonist was still being rude. However, the protagonist replied that something was coming. As soon as he said that, two statues appeared in the area, rank Death Knights. This left the group wondering how they ended up in such a place, and the frightened inspector told everyone to prepare for battle. The inspector and the two statues then engaged in an intense fight. Using his power, the inspector seemed to be holding his own against the two statues. At that point, the entire group joined the battle alongside the inspector. They strategized to block the monster's vision, shield the front lines, and keep attacking without giving the enemy any space. After managing to defeat the monsters, a girl in the group said they were safe now and admitted she hadn't expected them to be able to defeat A-rank monsters. One of the boys celebrated prematurely, claiming it wasn't a big deal and that he could do it again. But as he gloated, more statues began to appear behind him. Not just two, but for this time. With the appearance of these additional statues, the group became extremely frightened. Meanwhile, the protagonist analyzed the statues' bodies and realized something was very wrong with this place. Moments later, the fight continued, but the number of statues had increased significantly. The inspector then noticed that every time they defeated one statue, dozens more would appear. Furthermore, all the group members were already at their limits, and at this rate, they would all meet their end. Kim then informed the inspector that something very strange was happening in this dungeon. Looking at the protagonist, the inspector wondered who he truly was. Even after all the fighting, the protagonist showed no signs of fatigue and had been the first to sense the portal's danger. If not for the boosted attributes from the protagonist's ability, the monarch's heart wouldn't have stood a chance. The inspector questioned whether the protagonist was really just a C-ranked awakened. In shock, he asked Kim what he meant by something being wrong. The protagonist replied that it was just a hunch, but those monsters weren't Death Knights. These words filled the group with despair, leaving them to wonder what they had been fighting all this time in the dungeon. At that moment, the protagonist picked up a sword one of the monsters had been carrying and declared that he would find out right then. He then charged toward the statues with full force. However, he ignored all the smaller statues and headed straight for the largest one. His attempt was successful, and he quickly destroyed the largest statue. Upon its destruction, the entire dungeon scenery changed completely. The protagonist then revealed that it had all been an illusionary trap. It was a tactic designed to drain the energy of intruders by showing them a false environment and imaginary enemies. One group member, frustrated, exclaimed if all their hard work had been for a mere illusion. A girl also asked if this meant worse monsters were about to appear. The inspector, still perplexed, asked how the protagonist had known it was all a trap. After all, he couldn't have ever fought a Death Knight either. The protagonist replied that even though he didn't know much about it, there was no way the enemies could have been that weak. These words left the inspector completely unsettled. However, the protagonist said they should keep moving before they ended up becoming a memory. Even after the illusion disappeared, things didn't improve. Following the manifestation of the apocalypse, the dungeon space was completely transformed. The wounds sustained during the illusionary battle worsened gradually, but they couldn't afford to wait for help. Stuck's only hope is to find the exit of this dungeon. After walking for a while, they finally come across a portal. Despite finding the portal, the masked boy asks if it might be dangerous. Facing him, the inspector responds that it could be, but if they don't open it, they'll just die there anyway. So he ends up opening the portal only to be confronted by a death knight. Seeing the monster, the boy laughs at the sight of just one enemy. However, as the room becomes more illuminated, more of these monsters appear, filling the space. This leaves the group utterly terrified, prompting one of the members to ask if all these monsters are death knights. At that moment, the dungeon leader appears, laughing and declaring that inferior humans have managed to reach this place. He then orders them to start fighting. This monster is the Lord of the Death Knights and is rank S. At this moment, the statues in the room begin moving toward the group, though they don't attack immediately. Analyzing the monsters, the protagonist deduces that they seem to want one-on-one duels. Terrified, one of the boys says he can't fight anymore since he has no mana left. In turn, the protagonist tells everyone to calm down because their goal is not to fight, but to escape. After saying this, the group starts fleeing in desperation, except for Mohawk and the girl, who remains unconscious on the protagonist's shoulders. As they run, the boys exclaim that they'd rather go back to where they first appeared and that they don't want to die here. But at that moment, a statue swings its sword, hitting all three of those trying to flee. Witnessing this dangerous attack, the protagonist declares that he'll buy them time and that Mohawk should find a way to escape. However, Mohawk pushes the protagonist and the girl behind him, using his power to create a wall to protect them. At this moment, Kim asks what he's doing, but Mohawk orders him to stay silent. He calls Kim useless, unawakened, and says he should know his place and stop acting so full of himself. He then mentions that when he was younger, he wanted to become an S-rank player. But no matter how much he trained and improved his abilities, he was always far from achieving that level, growing more distant from his goal with each passing day. This was his chance. If he could handle this particular situation, maybe he'd start being treated like an S-rank. But in the end, this is how it turned out. At that instant, a statue charges at him, but Mohawk easily handles it. After defeating the statue, he says that Kim is different, and that infuriates him. But he also admits that Kim has talent for it. That's why Kim should take the injured and flee as far as possible. As their supervisor, fighting the statues is his duty. However, when the protagonist looks at the injured, he realizes they are no longer alive. Moments later, the wall created by Mohawk is completely destroyed and Mohawk is utterly defeated, losing his life in the process. The statue that took Mohawk's life raises its sword toward the protagonist, challenging him to a duel. Cornered in this situation, he looks down and spots the ring was wearing. At that instant, the statue attacks him, but he manages to dodge and grabs the man's ring. As he runs, he places the ring on his finger, thinking this is his only chance to make it out alive. He then commands the ring to awaken, causing a small explosion of energy that destroys the statues attempting to kill him. At this moment, the dungeon boss is shocked, wondering what kind of power this could be. By putting on the ring, all the conditions for its use were fulfilled, unsealing Predation. Additionally, all his attributes increased by 10 each. The protagonist then unleashes a significant amount of destruction with his mana, hurling his enemies away. However, while fighting, he realizes that Predation takes an average of 10 seconds to fully devour. So, he knows he can't rely solely on this ability. He decides to use all the attributes he's accumulated and all the skills he's gathered so far. Only then will he be able to escape this dungeon alive. At this moment, he notices a massive spear radiating energy and wonders what it might be. But with a single gesture from the dungeon boss, all the statues hurl spears at the protagonist. With great effort, he manages to dodge all the spears and the statues attacking him. He then finds himself face to face with the dungeon boss and of course attempts to do something. However, the boss uses an ability to launch the protagonist far away. He then says that while the protagonist was quite strong, that was his limit. With that, the protagonist was completely overpowered by his strength. With his sword and feet pressing down on the protagonist, the boss said there was still one last thing he wanted to ask. He then asked who had given them this power, but the protagonist began screaming in agony and pain. At that moment, his player's system informed him that a mysterious power was resisting the roar of the Night King, and part of this resistance had succeeded. The dungeon boss then mentioned that he already knew the protagonist, unlike normal humans, could understand his language. He asked again about the nature of this power. At this moment, the scene changed slightly, and in front of the protagonist appeared a massive figure of a monster with long horns and 4 arms. Looking to his side, the protagonist noticed the bodies of his fallen group members. Behind him stood the dungeon boss. Meanwhile, he thought that nothing looked the same as before. He began to wonder what exactly this ability called predation was, and how he, a mere human, started to understand the languages of monsters. He realized he had been entirely ignorant of everything, only gaining this power in a chance. And yet, nothing seemed to have changed for him. At that moment, the boss launched a dangerous, fatal attack. Even faced with such danger, Kim wondered why the king had given him this power. He then heard a voice saying that the reason had already been told to him. A man without clothes appeared under a light and said it was simply because he had been moved by Kim's determination and tenacity. The man also told him that he didn't mean to change but simply move forward. Apparently, all of this was a dream. However, when Kim opened his eyes, they were ringed and he bore an expression of anger. The dungeon boss, seeing this, commented that the protagonist seemed to have no strength left to answer him. He then called Kim a pathetic human and declared this would be his end, preparing to deliver the final blow. But before the attack landed, the protagonist managed to react using a strange power that destroyed several statues in an instant. Seeing the protagonist's response, the boss became excited and asked if Kim was trying to go into a frenzy. With this ability in his current condition, at that moment, Kim began increasing his mana by 1. Completely thrilled by the fight, the boss declared it was excellent to see Kim's final effort and that he would entertain him until the very end. The boss then charged at the protagonist with a strike, making his sword exude mana with tremendous force. Thinking he had struck the protagonist, the boss realized the powerful attack had no effect as Kim easily stopped it. Kim then asked if the boss was curious about the true nature of this power. As the boss expressed his desire to know more, the protagonist told him to find out for himself. As his strength and power increased, Kim's system notified him that he had just advanced to rank B. Kim then delivered such a powerful blow that the boss was sent flying. Afterward, Kim continued defeating the other statues with overwhelming strength. Realizing he was close to defeat, the boss questioned how an inferior human like Kim dared to achieve all this. The boss attempted to use an ability to trap the protagonist, but it failed entirely. At this moment, the protagonist declared that his power was not that of a human. It was the power of the king. Finally, Kim launched a crushing attack that the boss likely would not survive. With this victory, his system notified him again that he had acquired a new ability. The registered ability was called the Spirit of the Night King. Moments later, several hunters gathered in front of the portal to analyze it. Player Park then asked a woman what the magical reading of the portal was. She responded that it was an S-rank portal. She added that an evacuation order had already been issued, but the distortion inside the dungeon was causing delays in the withdrawal. As a result, she wasn't sure if a support squad would arrive before the dungeon break occurred. Player Park thought to himself that at this rate, everyone inside the dungeon would be doomed. Thus, he decided he would have to intervene alone to ensure their survival. The portal then began emanating an even greater energy, leading them to believe the dungeon break was already happening. For safety, Player Park told everyone to prepare for the worst-case scenario. However, from inside the portal, only the protagonist emerged. Kim said it was close, but he had managed to return from the dungeon. Thanks to the protagonist, the dungeon incident was resolved and the test participants were able to evacuate without significant issues. The results of this round were decided based on the evaluations from before the second round of exam. Additionally, the corpses were recovered and returned intact to the families of the deceased. It was decided not to reveal who cleared the Apocalypse dungeon. Moments later, the director speaks with 2 hunters, one being Park and the other unidentified, mentioning that they had to endure retaliation from the corporation. However, if they told the truth, it was obvious the protagonist would become a target of the press and villains. With those words, the 2 players understand the situation, and the director thanks them for their comprehension. He then asks what they thought about the protagonist who cleared the S-rank Apocalypse dungeon. In response, Player Park states that if the protagonist managed to clear an S-rank Apocalypse dungeon alone, he must at least be on the level of an S-rank player. However, the other player says that since his current rank is lower than S-rank, it's difficult to estimate his true power. Hearing this, the director asks what they mean by those words, and the 2 players begin to exchange glances. At that moment, one of them replies that there's a high chance he is at the level of national power. Back to the protagonist, he finds himself in a place with a completely red sky, surrounded by several extremely powerful monsters. Staying in the scene, he wonders how he ended up in the abyss. Moments later, the king appears in the sky above. Upon his appearance, the monsters attempt to attack him, but with a single motion, he reduces them all to dust. The king then declares that he will be waiting for the protagonist in the deepest corners of the abyss. After that, the protagonist wakes up in a hospital bed where he was admitted due to all the injuries he sustained in the S-rank dungeon. Upon waking, he wonders if it was a dream. but realizes it couldn't have been as it felt too real to be just a dream. He also reflects on what the king meant by waiting for him. He notices his predation ability, a skill even S-rank monsters are aware of, as well as his understanding of the monster language. This leaves him with even more questions. He concludes that becoming stronger and going to the abyss is the only way forward. After this, he checks his player statistics and finds them exactly as he suspected. He had a Lord of the Death Knights, but he truly has advanced to rank B. And with these attributes, he can rival an S-rank player in the spirit of the Night King. After all, he is certain that Predation is the skill that once crushed him with overwhelming force. At this pace of growth, it won't take long before he reaches the level of national power. Through the doors of his hospital room, it seems someone is trying to enter. However, the guards refuse to let them through, prompting the visitor to complain that it's outrageous they won't let her visit a sick person. Even as the president of the association, she calls this behavior truly wicked. She bursts through the door, asking the protagonist if he doesn't agree with her. Looking down, he notices that everyone who tried to stop her from entering is completely unconscious. After asking the protagonist if he agrees with her, she surprisingly calls him dear. Moments later, inside a car, a young man suggests to the guild master that it would be better if he drove instead. However, the woman replies that it won't be necessary since the protagonist is her guest and she should handle it. The protagonist then asks what the guild master of the Wanderers, one of the 4 great guilds, might want with him. The woman responds that she's just taking him home after his hospital discharge, while also checking out the one who survived the apocalypse. At this, Kim sarcastically remarks that if her reason was that trivial, she should have at least come up with a more plausible lie. The woman laughs and admits he's quite clever. She then asks if he knows what will happen in the 3rd round and the player test. The 3rd round will be a survival game similar to the 1st round. At this time, outsiders will be able to watch as part of the audience. Because of this, his abilities will be fully exposed to the public. All the guilds will undoubtedly start vying for the low-ranked Awaken, who managed to clear an S-rank dungeon. She asks to make him an offer he cannot refuse before that happens. Whether it's money or fame, she's willing to give him anything he desires to join the Wanderers Guild. After that request, the car fell into complete silence, creating a hostile atmosphere. After thinking over the offer, the protagonist simply declined despite it being a great opportunity. Bona hadn't expected this response and was left in shock. Moments later, the protagonist along with the other 2, the guild master and another young man, stopped in an alley. The protagonist thanked them for the ride, but said he would walk the rest of the way. The guild master, in turn, asked why he had refused the offer and whether he had even listened to her proposal. After all, whether it was money or anything else he desired, she was willing to make it happen for him. She then asked if he had declined because he had received an offer from another guild, or if he had misunderstood something by mistake. Kim responded, saying she shouldn't take the wrong way as he had no specific reason for declining. He had no other guild or conditions, and then asked if the Wanderers Guild was really that special. In the end, he said he refused simply because he didn't want to. And with that, he announced he was leaving. But as he descended the steps of the alley, before he could react, the woman grabbed him from behind and covered his mouth. With an intimidating aura, she asked what his deal was. She pointed out that he was just starting as a player, and he dared to reject one of the 4 major guilds without any specific reason, which didn't make sense to her. She then removed her hand from his mouth and said she would forgive him for refusing the offer. Moreover, she admitted to having a certain interest in him. At that moment, the young man accompanying them said that the protagonist was still in testing, so he questioned what she was doing with him. He also told Kim not to reject the guild master's offer without reason and insisted that he should accept it. After all, Kim would have to join a guild sooner or later. The protagonist then noticed the woman's stubbornness was exactly the same as expected. After all, it made sense considering she was the sister of Lai Mayan. The woman was shocked and asked how he knew about her relationship with the person mentioned. Kim simply replied that he knew a lot of things, including her stolen name. Realizing that the protagonist knew about this, she released a massive amount of mana, so strong it reached the sky. At this moment, her assistant thought the situation was dire. The guild master Astra Yuan's real name was Lim Ayan, and the CEO of the Yan group, Lim Chongyan, had raised her an illegitimate child as an heir. However, when another daughter was born within the family, her name was taken from her, and she was reduced to an outsider. The fact that she had changed her surname upon becoming a player was something only a few people should have known. With her hands around the protagonist's neck, she asked how he dared to spout such nonsense in her presence, and if he was missing a few screws. The protagonist replied that she was the one who had started it. At that moment, His assistant notified him that a mysterious force had successfully resisted the spirit of the Amazon. Kim then grabbed her arm and used his energy. Once again, his assistant informed him that he had successfully countered using the spirit of the Night King. With just his energy, he flung the woman backward. Stunned, she wondered what kind of power he was displaying. Kim thought to himself that as if resisting the powers of an S-rank player wasn't enough, he had also reversed them. He then climbed the steps toward her, pinning her against the wall. Staring at her, he warned her not to cross that line. And for a moment, the woman blushed slightly. Her assistant, feeling awkward, wondered if Kim had actually said those words. Days later, during the third round, the ancient Rome. Unlike the first and second rounds, which had not been revealed to the public, the third round would allow spectators, people from the industry, participants, families, and even civilians were present in the arena as the audience for the test. Among the civilians was Yu Yang, disguised as a regular citizen to watch the test, still blushing because of the protagonist. Among them was also the protagonist's father, who said that thanks to Kim, he could experience something like this. His mother, however, asked if everything would be okay, as she had heard that player tests were extremely challenging. At that moment, a young man told her not to worry about it because Kim was incredibly strong. He added that Kim could defeat all the players with a single strike. This young man, fully confident in the protagonist's abilities, is Gwang Jae-young, his cousin, and also the president of the protagonist fan club. Shortly after, a woman who overheard them in the stands thinks she needs to land a headline this time. Her name is Kim Ji-ja, a rookie reporter working for SSY Economics, and she is on the verge of being fired. For a moment, she recalls her last interview, which was discarded because it was with a low-ranking Awakened. She also considers the possibility that the protagonist might have been disqualified from the test, and with tears in her eyes, she knows she could lose her job if she doesn't land a good interview. At that moment, another young man in the stands asks the woman if the atmosphere doesn't seem a bit strange. Hearing the man's words, the journalist notices that countless high-ranking Awakened veterans and even Lee Gilson, a promising ranked candidate for the player test, are all staring at one person. This makes her wonder if they're all planning to team up to take down the protagonist for target, and also just how strong a protagonist could be. Shortly after, the beginning of the third round of the player test is announced. The audience is cautioned to be careful of impacts while watching. Then, the host declares the start of the test. The group begins preparing their enchantments. They charge toward the boy, saying they must get rid of him immediately. They claim he alone has defeated the S-rank since the first round. Because of this, if they don't eliminate him first, he'll probably defeat them all. Soon after, the young man appears in the midst of the attacks, landing a punch on each of them. An explosion occurs, and several people fall unconscious. The protagonist, in turn, observes everything in silence. Shortly after, he notices something strange as a spell hits him. Confused, the boy asks what that was. An unknown man comments that while he may have defeated Shranks, letting his guard down was a mistake. For this reason, he would be the winner of the test. However, within seconds, the protagonist defeats Lee. As a consequence, he suffers significant damage. Coldly, the boy asks for the next person to attack him. The entire group begins targeting the boy, believing that sustained attacks will tire him out eventually. Shortly after, Kim points his finger at the group and summons the spirit of the Night King. An intense light appears and a giant monster materializes above the boy. The monster observes everyone around as some of them begin to collapse. The other groups seeing this situation become extremely desperate. The people in the stands watch everything in silence. A boy comments that he shouldn't have used that ability in the center. The scene shifts upward, showing several bodies on the ground. Kadam in turn feels relief as he has finally ended it. Now there's only one thing left to do. Shortly after, a girl with blue hair appears on the scene. She seems injured from the previous boy's attacks. Kim asks what Lin intends to do, as it doesn't matter to him if she withdraws from the test. At this point, she could still choose to repeat the first round. Lin then begins casting her ice magic, forming a giant sphere around the arena. As a result, she traps the protagonist inside it. Lin comments that Kim should worry about himself because this time, what happened before won't. With a cold stare, Kim asks if she's really sure about that. Some time passes during the battle, and the girl is ultimately defeated, collapsing unconscious to the ground. The protagonist remarks that it was expected of her because despite her demeanor, she was still the most challenging opponent. The host then announces that with this, the player tests have concluded and the protagonist is the highest qualifier of the test. Sometime later, the scene shifts to the president presenting the rewards to the boy. He congratulates him on becoming an S-rank player. Furthermore, he didn't expect him to end the third round single-handedly. Kim says that all of it was just luck. Hearing this, the man remains silent. He then calls the boy again, asking if he would like to join the South Korean Player Association. Kim, hearing this, is very surprised. The man asks him again what he wants. Kim reflects on how much has changed as a sleeper like him became an S rank, and even the highest qualifier in the test. He even received an offer, not just from a leader, but from one of the greatest guilds, which is also the largest association in New Korea. For this reason, the more he thinks he understands this world, the less he knows what might happen next. However, there was still something he wished to do. As a result, he ended up refusing the offer, believing that instead of being a member of the four major guilds of the association, it was better to work alone. For that reason, he wanted to apologize for not being of help to the man. Hearing what the protagonist said, the man was surprised. He began laughing heartily, saying he had never imagined that Kim would claim to be better off alone rather than with the great guilds or the association. This showed that the young man truly had a high level of confidence. Because of this, the man suggested he should try something else instead of joining the association. He asked if Kim might be interested in participating in the Asian exhibition games. Sometime later, the scene shifted to the protagonist inside a dungeon surrounded by numerous monsters. However, they were all defeated easily. Kim felt relieved that another dungeon had been cleared. He then recalled what the man had said about the Asian exhibition games. It was a festival where associations or guilds from each Asian country selected 5 representatives. These representatives would hunt monsters and compete against one another. However, to be chosen, one needed a track record of achievements that showed the monsters they had defeated. A flashback appeared, showing the man saying that given the protagonist's pace, he believed it would be a great option for him. Kim thought that talking was easy because he had only just become a player. To reach the level of merit that others had taken years to build, he would need to hunt monsters in much stronger dungeons. Yet, despite clearing all the dungeons that had appeared in Korea over the past month, not only did he fail to accumulate significant merit, but he also didn't grow as he had hoped. As expected, it was all extremely dangerous. Even so, there was no other choice but to go to that place. The scene then shifted to a mansion where a glass seemed to be falling in slow motion. At the same time, a man appeared to be strangled by someone. The man begged the president to calm down. The enraged man shouted that the hairdresser was still in the hospital, and while the culprit had done that, he was walking free at that moment. He asked how he was supposed to calm down under such circumstances. Moments later, the man collapsed unconscious to the floor. At that instant, a girl appeared saying there was a visitor from the malicious guild. The man questioned why they still hadn't dealt with the protagonist. After all the money he had given them, he declared that he would handle it himself. But he was startled when an intimidating aura surrounded the door. An unknown man appeared, apologizing for his son, but insisting it was better to calm down. He asked if Tessa's goal was really to waste time on that kid. Introducing himself, the man said he was the vice master of the malicious guild. He was known as Shadow. The scene then shifted to a portal in another location. Meanwhile, someone seemed to be coming out of it. Shortly after, a man called out to him as he stood in front of a door. The man addressed him as a ranked player and said the alchemists were ready to assist with the auction. He introduced himself as Park and said it was an honor to meet him. He asked if he could possibly get the protagonist autograph as his performance in the third test had been sensational. Park explained that this was Asia's most prestigious auction district. It held the largest and most magnificent auctions in Asia, offering unparalleled quality items. The district even supported features like automatic translation abilities. Among its many qualities, East Point stood out for numerous reasons. However, what truly caught everyone's attention and was considered its pinnacle was its security. Bodyguards, such as those present at the auctions, always play a crucial role. However, the teleportation points constantly changed and it was impossible to reach the area without authorization. Because of this, there had been no security issues for decades. Observing the situation, the protagonist thought the title of the best security system was well observed. However, on that very day, a terrorist attack by an S-rank villain would occur there. Sometime later, an announcer proclaimed that the moment had finally arrived. The auction's most coveted prize was about to be awarded. It was a potion that, with just one sip, could increase one's health by 20 points. Meanwhile, who was observing everything from above? It was the protagonist thinking that all he needed now was to wait for the terrorist. Killing an S-rank villain would allow him to accumulate more merit. However, the lack of information was still a significant issue. All he knew before returning was that East Point had suffered brutal losses, and that the head of the terrorist attack was an S-rank villain named Narendra. For this reason, he wanted to know who had stopped that man. At that moment, the security guard appeared. Kim in turn asked who was in charge of security at that location. The security guard questions why he wants to know, and the protagonist responds that it's just out of curiosity. At that moment, the announcer starts speaking again. He mentions that several S-rank players are present at the location, and they appear to be heading toward a specific area where they end up encountering the protagonist. An unknown man asks if by any chance his name is Kim. The security guard says the man is an S-rank player from Japan, and the chief responsible for security at that location. For this reason, Kim should be extremely cautious around him. The guard explains that he is known as the demon among players, notorious for betraying even his own partners when it suits him. Greeting the boy, the man says he heard that Kim is an unprecedented genius from New Korea. For this reason, he never expected to meet the boy at that location. Observing the situation, Kim is surprised because the man is greeting him with his left hand. Immediately after, Kim returns the handshake in the same manner. However, he feels something unusual when their hands touch. It seems like he receives an electric shock. The man is surprised and says he can't believe Kim endured that. For this reason, Kim must truly be an S-rank player. At that instant, something strange happens. The people around them begin collapsing to the ground. Kim thinks that if they fought there, civilians could end up getting involved. The man comments that it seems he went a bit too hard on the rookie who just became an S-rank. Shortly after, he releases the protagonist's hand and steps closer to him. He says not all S-ranks are the same, and that while he doesn't know why Kim is there, he should stop any nonsense and stay in his place. As he walks away, he tells the boy to enjoy the rest of the auction. Watching everything, Kim remains silent, thinking the situation is more complicated than he expected. The scene then cuts to another building. A group of people appears to be heading toward another group. Someone asks who these people are and how they managed to get inside. An older man replies that it doesn't matter how they got in, since there's only one portal control room in the building, and if they've reached that area, their target is to be eliminated. He adds that the task should be left to him because a ranked player can handle it easily. Time passes. The scene shifts to a monster defeating several people. The older man seems to have been defeated as well, and an unknown man observes him with a menacing gaze. Soon after, more people arrive and a man comments that there was a setback at the auction. He mentions that the S-rank player from Korea is present at the location, and asked what should be done. Nero wonders if that man really thinks he can do whatever he wants, even with him there. For this reason, no one will escape his divine judgment. The scene then cuts back to another location. At that moment, the building explodes. Apparently, the auction inside it is also engulfed in flames. It's revealed that the protagonist is also at the location, and the explosion seems to have hit him. In a matter of seconds, all the buildings appear to be on fire. Returning to the security guard, he asks if the protagonist is okay. He says they need to evacuate immediately. Kim thinks that it doesn't make sense because he knew there would be an attack, but he didn't expect explosions everywhere. Because of this, he wonders how the villains infiltrated and how the bombs were planted. However, he decides to set that aside as there's something more important. Looking ahead, he notices a man holding a weapon and taking people hostage. The man threatens that anyone who resists will get a bullet to the head in seconds. Man is easily defeated by the protagonist. The security guard observing this is astonished. Kim instructs the guard to notify the association about the situation and request reinforcements, because he's going to personally go after whoever is responsible for this chaos. The scene then shifts back to the other location. A man says that these are auction items, not for thieves like them. Shortly after, the unknown man orders everyone to be defeated. A battle ensues with several people already dead. The man eventually opens a chest. Apparently, he finds what he was looking for. It turns out to be an item from the earlier auction. The man thinks he understands why Nero went to such lengths for that potion, even risking his life. Just by looking, one could sense the immense power, and for that reason, he was contemplating the case if he used it. At that very moment, another explosion occurred. One of his companions was thrown back. The man, on the other hand, had no idea what was happening. One of his subordinates mentioned that an enemy was nearby. Another subordinate remarked that the enemy's appearance seemed familiar. However, in the next instant, that subordinate was defeated. Then the other two in front of him met the same fate. The man, surprised, thought that the ability must be stealth. Yet within seconds, he was attacked. Even so, wasn't enough to take him down. As a result, he activated his chain ability, successfully trapping the protagonist within it. Calling the boy an idiot, he asked if he thought he could just turn invisible and act freely. For that, he would die right then and there. The protagonist, surprised, remarked that the ability could even track invisible enemies. Because of this, he thought it might be worth devouring it. The scene then shifted to another location. The hostages in that place were terrified. An incredible number of monsters were in the area watching them. This was the teleportation portal's control room. Above them all, Nero declared that everything was going as planned. And with this, everyone would fear the existence of that god even more. All that remained now was the Phoenix Potion. And at that moment, a subordinate appeared. He reported news of the group that had gone after the potion. For this reason, there was still an issue to resolve. A subordinate handed over a communication device. On the other end, someone asked if the person he was speaking to was Nero. Nero, on the other side of the line, asked who was speaking. The protagonist responded that he was the one who had stolen Nero's belongings. He added that if Nero wanted them back, he'd have to come get them in person, calling Nero a piece of trash terrorist. He left the man completely enraged. Kim then drank the potion, and as a result, his strength and magic increased significantly. At that moment, he mentioned hearing that the potion was of unique rank, something truly extraordinary. His attributes had skyrocketed in the blink of an eye, something he had never experienced in a dungeon before. And by drinking the potion, he no longer needed to worry about it falling into enemy hands. Moments later, a group of individuals arrived at a location where several players had already been defeated. One of them mentioned that another man was supposed to be there according to his last signal, so he wondered if he might have fled. The head of security, however, laughed and asked what they were talking about, noting that the man they were searching for was right in front of them. He then told the protagonist to stop hiding and reveal himself. The protagonist appeared, remarking that it was strange since his invisibility was supposed to be flawless. The man then asked why someone of Kim's S rank would be in that place. Kim, in turn, asked if the man wasn't the head of security and whether he shouldn't be trying to stop the terrorists. Laughing again, the head of security replied that he was after a special item. Hearing this, Kim laughed and said he had suspected something was off. After all, despite the heavy security presence, no one had found the bombs. He also noted that they had infiltrated the East Point, a place impossible to enter without authorization. For this reason, he had suspected a traitor, but hadn't expected it to be the head of security himself. The head of security replied that he had warned the protagonist to stay out of it, then lunged at him. However, the protagonist easily defended against his attack. During the fight, the man demanded that Kim hand over the item. Kim replied that if he was truly a villain, he should try to take it by force. The battle intensified with debris flying everywhere. Frightened by the fight, one of the observers told the group that this was a battle between two S ranks, so they shouldn't even think about interfering. Moreover, Real High, the head of security, was known as the demon, and if they were careless, they'd end up dead. During the fight, the protagonist noticed that unlike himself, who relied on sound and intuition, the man could see him even with his techniques. Eventually, despite his invisibility, Kim was struck by a fatal blow. He reflected on the immense gap in their abilities, but it was still not the time to resort to the devouring technique. Then he uses an ability that lifts all of his enemies into the air as if using gravity magic. When they reach a considerable height, he slams them back down with immense gravitational force, causing devastating damage to them. After throwing everyone to the ground, the protagonist searches for the whereabouts of the head of security. However, he doesn't find the man among the others. A voice from the shadows comments that it was a good decision, but invisibility is useless against area attacks. It adds that if he wanted to find him, he should have also protected his own head. At that moment, the head of security charges at the protagonist with overwhelming force and a radiant aura. The impact he creates makes it seem like he has defeated the protagonist. However, as he stands over the protagonist, he realizes that chains are wrapped not only around the protagonist, but also his sword. The protagonist coldly remarks that in the end, the man truly is a fool. This unnerves the head of security, making him realize that the protagonist's previous ability wasn't meant to find him, but to prevent him from escaping his reach. While using his chain powers, the protagonist asks where he thinks he's going. He then hurls his chains at him, pulling him back and striking him with an incredibly powerful punch. With this, the head of security and his henchmen are completely the protagonist. Shortly after, Kim demands an explanation for why an S-rank player would become a criminal for money. The head of security angrily tells him to shut up, saying that if it weren't for Kim's interference, he'd probably be enjoying his success right now. The protagonist interrupts him with an extremely powerful kick to the face, telling him that his tongue is to lose for a petty criminal. The kick is so forceful that it sends the head of security flying. Kim then instructs him to deliver a message to Narendra. He must tell him that requests for support must already be flooding the associations of every country. Kim then asks if he's aware that with the reinforcements arriving, both he and Narendra are going to meet their downfall. The head of security, utterly defeated, begins to laugh. He says that as expected, The protagonist is nothing more than a rookie who knows absolutely nothing. These words leave the protagonist momentarily stunned. The scene shifts to an older man with white hair and a short beard running toward a room. Upon arriving, he asks how the reinforcements for the eastern wing of the building are progressing. This man is Su Sang-hik, the guild master of the alchemist, one of the four major S-rank guilds. He also mentions that besides the auction items belonging to his guild, there are numerous VIPs from New Korea, and at this rate, everyone will end up in the hands of the terrorists. One of the people in the room tells Swang-hek to calm down. He explains that as soon as they heard about the terrorist attack, they organized a support team. Park Seung-jin is leading the team, and he emphasizes that it is an elite squad. Su Sang-hik then asks why they haven't departed yet, and says that if it's an issue of personnel or materials, his guild can handle it. However, the man explains that the problem isn't resources, but the lack of a way to reach the location. At this, Su Sang-hyuk asks what he means, and the man explains that the terrorists have taken control of the portal room in the eastern wing. This means they have locked all access portals, but he reassures that the situation is under control. After all, there are 2 S-rank players on site, Kim Tae-gun, who just became an S-rank, and on the terrorist side, only Narendra knew. Until the portal is re-established, the 2 players should be able to handle the situation and might even defeat Narendra Nu. At that moment, a woman enters the room. Upon hearing these words, she responds that such confidence might be valid if the opponent were any ordinary shrank. This woman is none other than Yua, a renowned player. Back to the protagonist, the terrorist asks if he's ever heard of the Skilled Demons Pact. Kim, however, seems to have no idea what this ability is. The terrorist explains that it's Narendra Nu's most terrifying skill. It allows him to sacrifice offerings and, depending on their quality, summon demons of equivalent strength. Curious, the protagonist wonders what kind of offerings these might be. Thus, the terrorist asks what else Kim would sacrifice if not people. Meanwhile, Yu and the others were discussing Narendra Nu's abilities. Upon learning about his abilities, the men in the room were completely shocked. The man mentioned that at least hundreds of hostages were in Narendra Nu's hands. An elder added that Nu was known as one of the most powerful among S-rank players. If he used hundreds of people as sacrifices to summon demons, it would be a massive disaster. At the same time, the protagonist was beating up the head of security. Taking blows from the protagonist, the man began to laugh, saying that Kim might have been lucky so far, but against Narendra Nu, he wouldn't stand a chance. He then asked if the protagonist would kneel and beg for his life, while watching the hostages be sacrificed, or if he would face a fight with no chance of victory and meet his end. In the room with the other terrorist, a subordinate informed Noi that Isuka Ryo, along with the protagonist who defeated Ryohei and took the Phoenix Potion, had disappeared without a trace. Nu asked what they should do in such circumstances. He then stated that as it would be impossible to confront them directly, the protagonist was likely waiting for support from the association. At that moment, Nu used his power to sacrifice to hostages, declaring that if Kim didn't show up, they would simply need to drag him out. He also announced that the festival in the name of the gods should begin. But before he could harm the hostages further, the room suddenly became pitch black. His subordinates questioned why this was happening now, even though the bomb had detonated some time ago. Even in total darkness, Nu noticed that the captured hostages had vanished in the blink of an eye, which could mean only one thing. Shortly after, the protagonist appeared behind Nu with his magical chains. Using his chains, Kim landed a hit on Nu. Believing he had won, Kim celebrated prematurely, thinking he had captured him. But from the folds of Nu's head, several snakes appeared to counterattack. These snakes, imbued with fire abilities, caused a massive explosion to protect their master. Despite the explosion, the protagonist managed to evade it. Observing the situation, Kim wondered what kind of madness it was to hide monsters inside one's own head. Near the hostages, one of them asked if he was player Kim and if he had come to save them. Terrified, the hostages begged for help, saying that these monsters had appeared out of nowhere. Another hostage promised a reward if the protagonist saved them. However, Kim told them they were getting in the way and used his chains to fling them to safety. Immediately after, several of the villain's monsters charged at Kim. They seemed to land a powerful hit, but Kim emerged unscathed. Using his previously cast magic, Kim attempted to press the monsters to the ground, but had no effect on them. Even with his abilities, the monsters managed to move and counterattack, leaving Kim shocked. As the monsters swarmed toward the protagonist, Nu laughed and called him knave. He explained that the creatures born from his demonic pact were entirely different from the monsters Kim had faced so far. Thanks to his pact with the demon, Nu had total control over all the monsters he created. His power made them much more resistant and far stronger than ordinary creatures. He'd also remarked that just because Kim had defeated the head of security, he shouldn't think he could challenge the gods. Meanwhile, the hostages noticed that the protagonist was being completely overwhelmed. One hostage remarked that Kim had ignored their cries for help, done whatever he wanted, and still couldn't defeat a single monster. Hearing this, another hostage defended Kim, telling him to pay closer attention. Pointing to the fight, he explained that because of the protagonist, the monsters weren't even looking at them. Despite being under immense pressure, Kim hadn't run away, and he hadn't allowed any of the monsters to approach the hostages. Even the hostages who had been flung into the air had been evacuated to a safe location, far from the fight. With tears streaming down his face, an elderly man declared that from the beginning, the protagonist had been trying to save their lives and they hadn't realized it. Moved by his words, all the hostages began to shed tears and started cheering for the protagonist. The protagonist begins using his chains to fend off the monsters. Angrily, he says that enough is enough. They should all shut up and stop bothering him. Hearing this, everyone in the room is outraged by what they just heard. The protagonist then comments that the hostages are only getting in the way, and that these monsters seem endless. He adds that it's so disgusting he can barely stand it. Hearing these words from the protagonist, the hostages appear angry at his remarks. Meanwhile, Nero burst into laughter and asks if the protagonist has already admitted defeat. At that moment, the protagonist calls out for player part Jian Wang, who has again appeared to end this mess. Shortly after, Jian Wang enters the room, prompting the terrorist leader to question his identity and how long he has been there. Entering the room, Jian Wang apologizes to the protagonist for the delay and declares that the real fight is about to begin. Moments earlier, after Kim defeated the traitors, he told Jian Wang that the escort squad was actually aligned with the terrorist. Jian Wang asked if all of this had happened while he was still outside. Kim replied that his current concerns lay elsewhere. He explained that the portal control room was likely infested with monsters. If it were just the monsters, it wouldn't be too problematic. But the monsters wouldn't just stand by idly. More importantly, the hostages might get caught up in the fight. That's why he needed Jian Wang's portal manipulation ability. Jian Wang hesitated, saying he'd like to help, but couldn't locate the exact point, which made accessing the association impossible. Hearing this, the protagonist assured him it wasn't a problem. All he needed was one thing: to get rid of all the monsters in the room. Back in the present, Jian Wang opens portals in the room, sucking the monsters into them. Watching this scene, Nero becomes visibly stressed and demands to know what's going on. Jian Wang reflects on how insane this plan sounded when he first heard it, but now he can't believe Kim made it work. With the plan succeeding, Jian Wang realizes only the terrorists remain and thinks victory is within reach. However, Kim shouts his name, telling him his role here is done. He should take the hostages and leave the area. Hearing this, Jian Wang appears reluctant, saying he wants to stay and fight alongside him. But the protagonist insists, explaining that his opponent is now an S-rank player. From here on out, he won't be able to protect anyone during the fight. While Jian Wang evacuates the hostages, the protagonist and Nero prepare for their final battle. The battle begins with Nero using explosive snakes to attack. However, Kim manages to evade the explosions. Dodging the attacks, Nero starts using the rocks in the area to strike at the protagonist. As he relentlessly attacks Kim, Nero asks if he really thinks he's an S-rank. He mocks Kim, questioning whether a kid like him could possibly stop him. Nero then lands a fire-based snake attack on the protagonist, sending him crashing to the ground. Afterward, Nero declares that it doesn't matter how many monsters Kim defeats or how many hostages he saves. If he can't defeat Nero, all of his efforts will have been in vain. While Kim lies on the ground, Nero calls him a filthy heretic as punishment for defiling God's name. Nero says Kim must pay with his life and orders his remaining monsters to attack him. Just as the attack is about to hit, the protagonist starts laughing and asks what all the shouting is about. Still lying down, Kim tells Nero that he's the one who's about to meet God. At that moment, the protagonist unleashes all the energy he had been suppressing during the fight. This leaves Nero completely stunned, wondering if Kim had been hiding all this power the entire time. Laughing at the protagonist, Nero admits that Kim might actually be a first-rate sacrifice. But he adds that Kim isn't the only one with tricks up his sleeve. Kim hears coughing noises and looks around, noticing 3 of Nero's henchmen in bad shape. One by one, the 3 begin to disintegrate. Nero recites the words to complete a ritual sacrifice using the lives of his henchmen. As a result, an S-rank skeletal dragon with a green aura materializes. Meanwhile, Jian Wang is battling other henchmen to keep the hostages alive. One henchman asks what's up with these people, while another suggests they must have escaped from an upper floor. Thus, the man said that since they had escaped from above, there would be no problem in taking their lives. But before they could do anything to harm the hostages, their lives were taken as sacrifices for Nero. Still fighting, Kim continued to be increasingly pressured by the dragon. Riding on the back of the monster, Nero told Kim that dragons remain the strongest. Desperate to survive, Kim attached a chain to the ceiling to pull himself to the next floor of the building and escape. At that moment, he wondered where that monster had come from. However, with little time to think, the monster appeared before him once again. Before Kim could react, the dragon struck him with its tail, sending him flying. Meanwhile, Nero shouted frantically at the protagonist to die. Momentarily, Kim tried to use a power against the dragon, but it had no effect on the creature. With this failed attempt, the dragon unleashed its green flames, completely obliterating the area. Observing this, Nero remarked that it was unexpected that despite receiving such a powerful attack, Kim had still managed to survive. At the same time, the protagonist clung to the walls with his chains, but he was in a devastated state, completely battered. At that moment, Kim thought that the monster was absurdly strong. He couldn't believe he had barely managed to withstand its attack, even using the full power of predation. This made him question if it was truly shrank, but considering how much force it was exerting, there was no way its 8-oral ability could come out unscathed. Even in this condition, the protagonist realized that Nero was nearing his limit. With that, if Kim persisted a little longer, he might be able to survive. Immediately after, Nero starts laughing and calls him a filthy unbeliever. He says he can see what he was since a direct confrontation didn't work. You must be thinking of stalling for time. In his words, that wouldn't be a bad strategy. However, Nero tells him he must know that his petty tricks won't work against him. Next, Nero moves with his dragon toward the hostages to destroy them all in a single blow. He strikes the building, causing massive destruction. Immediately afterward, reinforcements manage to establish a full connection with the emergency portal to send them to the coordinates of the eastern point of the building. At that moment, a woman says that her country and New Korea are the only countries connected. And even for a player like him, she thinks entering the portal now could be very dangerous. Hearing this, the player says that's nonsense. And he also tells her to think about how much danger the boy must be in at this very moment. This leaves the woman a little thoughtful, and the man says they will enter the eastern point right now, and that they will take out some terrorists and rescue their companions. On the other side of the portal, the hostages attacked by the dragon are miraculously still alive and right in front of them. Is the protagonist fighting to protect them? Laughing, Nero says he already expected the protagonist to make the choice to protect them. And in that case, he tells him he should burn to ashes. Seeing the protagonist in dire straits, the man tells him not to worry about them and asks what good it would do if he ended up losing his life. Hearing the man's words, the protagonist thinks he's right since he cannot win in a direct confrontation. The only way to defeat Nero is to push him to his limit. But even so, he still cannot give up. With this in mind, he thinks about how he could save all the hostages. While pondering a way to save all the hostages, he suddenly hears a voice in the background saying they couldn't longer. Hearing these words, the protagonist looks behind him in astonishment, but sees no one other than his fallen companion on the ground. Then something strange happens to his power. As the rank of his protection is being temporarily adjusted, his power rank increases to A. Then his powers surpass their limits and his body can no longer handle the predation power. This leaves the protagonist confused, wondering what was happening to him since all his powers were temporarily increasing, and his predation had already reached rank S though it was recently rank A. With so much energy being released by this power explosion, the entire scene becomes ominous, making Nero wonder what was going on. As the protagonist's power continues to grow, his player's system notifies him that predation cannot be deactivated. While seemingly agonizing in pain, he wonders if the predation has spiraled out of control. Thinking about the voice he heard moments ago, he wonders if the king had given him these powers. As his body disintegrates, he thinks this is ridiculous and questions if he will really die this way. A meaningless death to him. After everything he has done to get to where he is for him, no matter the cost, he cannot die this way. Even wanting to fight as his body disintegrates, he falls to the ground, unable to move anymore. Observing this, Nero wonders if he forced himself to lose control of his own ability. However, a devastating energy begins emanating in the area, making him question what kind of ridiculous amount of energy this is. For Nero, the hardest thing to understand is that the protagonist couldn't handle the power of the ability and pass out. Yet, he wonders why the ability hasn't stopped, even though the protagonist is unconscious. Nero then asks how a mere filthy unbeliever dares to do this and says that if he intends to kill himself to oppose a god that Nero will kill the protagonist with his own hands. He then advances with his dragon toward the young man, but a blast of power is launched against him, and his dragon loses one of its legs. Nero is confused and wonders what is happening. Soon after, the old man realizes that the protagonist is still standing, and that around the building are several enormous, furious monsters. Kim Toin laughs as he remembers the man calling himself a god. Frightened, Nero questions who that person is, as that is no longer the protagonist. The young man in turn says the old man shouldn't worry about it because he was already dead. Then he uses his new ability, striking Nero and his dragon directly. Momentarily, the protagonist finds himself in his subconscious. After that, he is bound by chains. He questions whether it was stone skin or paralysis. A demonic entity appears above the boy. While in agony, Kim Toin says those were his abilities. The demon laughs upon hearing that, mocking the fact that the power never belonged to the protagonist and that he must pay the price for what he consumes. The creature then advances toward the boy. However, the protagonist falls out of his bed and wonders if it was all just a dream. He then notices he has no injuries and that his right arm, which had collapsed due to consumption, is also fine. Shortly after, Jin enters the room. While they eat lunch, the man says that the house was prepared for the boy by the association and by the alchemist as a response to the terrorist incident. He then mentions that Ryo Hai had been arrested and that considering the scale of the terror, many people had survived and that the boy's relatives had visited him. Jin then comments that the medical results showed no health issues for the young man and that he stayed because he was concerned about the minors. The protagonist remains silent and says he clearly lost consciousness while fighting the Golden Alpid. He then asks the man when it happened. After defeating Nero, one of the civilians asks what that entity had done to the protagonist. Kim Toin uses his ability, and the man begins coughing up blood. Shortly after, the demon smiles and says it will retreat for now, and then the boy faints. After some time, Xiangjin and his men arrive at the scene, confirming that there were survivors. A woman mentions that everyone seemed to have lost consciousness without any life-threatening issues. However, the miners in the Golden Alpid were missing. While holding the protagonist, the man wonders what happened there. Afterward, Xiangjin says the survivors only remember the boy trying to stop the Golden Alpid, but couldn't recall the details, as if something was interfering with their minds. The man stands up and says he believes it to be the work of those miners. As he leaves the room, Xiangjin tells the protagonist to take care of himself, and that if more information came in, he would contact him. Kim Tae-hyun then thinks about how his arm had regenerated, even after collapsing due to excessive consumption, and that perhaps the Golden Alpid was also affected by the consumption. After that, Jin reappears saying the boy had another visitor, and then Lim enters the room holding a basket of fruit, placing it on top of the boy's food. She then asks if the protagonist is okay because she heard he was injured, and that he had saved many people during this recent terrorist attack. Facing two of his rank opponents, the girl gets irritated and crushes an apple, saying the protagonist should be arrogant. Kim Tae-hyun asked what the young woman is doing there. Lim A gets nervous and replies that she was there to visit a sick person. Then she wonders what that incredible aura around the boy was. And then someone knocks on the door. The protagonist wonders who that person might be. Afterward, Sunningjin appears. Lim A Young asked what she was doing in the protagonist's house and how she knew his house's password. The woman responds that the password was provided by the association. Shortly after, Sis grabs the protagonist. Limon questions what the woman is doing and says it's a crime because the boy is still a minor. Kim Tae-hyun frees himself from the woman and asks what she is doing there. Sis replies that she is just visiting a sick person and says she brought a gift. The woman then asks if he was aiming for the Asia-friendly games, and that despite his achievements in the Eastern Point, he was still in 30th place. In public merit, needing a significant score to qualify for the top 5. Sis then says she will give him the dungeon. In a mysterious location, a man asks about the whereabouts of the Golden Alpid, but his subordinate responds that they still had no confirmation and questions whether they should report it to the boss. By the end of his rise, Tay Hyun was no longer the powerless student everyone had dismissed. Every stolen skill, brutal test, and impossible dungeon had transformed humiliation into proof of undeniable strength. He protected people who once doubted him, defeated enemies who considered themselves untouchable, and kept moving toward the abyss. His revenge was never just about hurting bullies, because each victory reclaimed the life weakness had stolen from him. Kim Tae-hyun finally stood as the king's chosen predator, advancing by his own will and refusing to bow again.